Hello guys, welcome to Fiction Quest. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto formed the ultimate alliance by marrying into the Kuja, Wano, and Alabasta royal families. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Maelstrom and the Serpent Empress. The world ended in a flash of bone-white light and the tearing scream of reality itself. One moment, Naruto Uzumaki was locked in a battle that would decide the fate of his world, fists and will clashing against his brother in all but blood. The next, he was falling through a void of screaming, silent color. The pressure was immense, a physical force that squeezed his very soul, threatening to extinguish the roaring sun of the nine-tailed fox sealed within him. He felt a violent, final snap, and then there was only the cold. Saltwater filled his mouth, a brutal shock that jolted him back to a semblance of consciousness. He coughed, lungs burning, and flailed wildly. Above him, a sun he didn't recognize beat down from a sky that was too vast, too blue, too empty. There were no continents floating in the distance, no chakra-laced clouds, just an endless expanse of shimmering water that met the horizon in a perfect, indifferent line. He was alone. Panic, cold and sharp, tried to claw its way up his throat, but years of warfare had beaten it into submission. He forced his body to tread water, his muscles screaming in protest. A quick, desperate scan of his internal state sent a jolt of genuine fear through him. His chakra pathways were a tangled, frayed mess. It felt like every wire in a complex machine had been violent Y ripped out and then shoved back in the wrong place. Kurama was there. A deep and weary rumble in the back of his mind, but his presence was muted, exhausted. The fox's own immense energy had been nearly drained, shielding them from the worst of the dimensional passage. "Kid, where are we?" The voice was a gravelly thought, stripped of its usual bravado. Naruto had no answer. He could feel no familiar natural energy, only the raw, untamed power of the massive ocean around him. He was a sage, a master of sensing the life force of the world, but this world felt alien. It was like trying to breathe in a room with different air. He was adrift, wounded, and for the first time since he was a child, truly and utterly lost. Hours bled into one another. The alien sun climbed to its zenith, searing his skin, and began its slow descent. Dehydration was setting in, and a grim, weary acceptance was starting to settle over him. He had saved his world only to die in another. A bitter, ironic end for the child of prophecy. He floated on his back, staring up at the clouds, his one remaining arm, the one not lost in his final clash with Sasuke, draped across his chest. It was then that a shadow fell over him. He blinked, his vision swimming. A ship, but it was unlike any he had ever seen. It was a massive vessel, carved with intricate designs, but its most striking feature was the two colossal, awesome sea serpents that seemed to be a part of its very structure, their stone heads flanking the prow. A flag flew from its mast, a strange skull with a snake coiled through its eye sockets. Figures lined the rails, and as his vision cleared, he realized with a jolt that they were all women. Tall, powerful-looking women armed with bows and spears, their eyes fixed on him with a mixture of curiosity and cold hostility. He didn't have the strength to fight, not that he would have. He watched as a rope was thrown, and rough hands hauled his waterlogged body from the sea. He collapsed onto the wooden deck, coughing up seawater. The world a dizzying blur of female faces looking down at him. They spoke in a language that was foreign, yet, miraculously, he understood it. It was another bizarre gift from the chaotic transit. The last thing he saw before darkness claimed him was a pair of sandals stepping into his field of vision, the woman they belonged to radiating an aura of absolute command. When Naruto awoke, it was to the scent of medicinal herbs and the feeling of cool stone against his back. He sat up, his head throbbing. He was in a simple cell, the walls carved from smooth rock. A single barred window let in a sliver of daylight. His tattered orange and black jacket was gone, replaced by a loose-fitting, unfamiliar garment. His wounds had been cleaned and bandaged with surprising care. He flexed his fingers, feeling the sluggish flow of chakra beginning to reconnect within him. It was a trickle where there should have been a raging river. He pushed himself to his feet and moved to the bars, peering out. He was in some kind of fortress or palace built into the side of a lush, green mountain. The architecture was ornate and unfamiliar. In the courtyard below, women's spa. RRED with an intensity that would have put many of Konoha's shinobi to shame. They moved with a predatory grace, their bodies honed weapons. Not a single man was in sight. A sound at his cell door made him turn. A young woman with short blonde hair and a kind face entered, carrying a tray of food and water. She wore a simple warrior's garb and had a snake wrapped loosely around her neck, its head resting on her shoulder. It watched him with unblinking eyes. "You're awake," she said, her voice soft but cautious. She placed the tray just inside the bars, keeping a safe distance. "I am Marguerite. You should eat. You have been unconscious for 3 days. 3 days. Naruto's voice was a rough rasp. He gratefully took the water, drinking deeply. "Thank you. Where am I?" "You are on Amazon Lily, the island of women," Marguerite explained, her eyes full of a guarded curiosity. "Our home. You are the first man to set foot on this island and live." The finality in her tone sent a chill down his spine. "Live? What do you mean? Men are forbidden here," she said simply. "The fact that you were brought here at all is a complication. Our empress will decide what is to be done with you." Naruto leaned against the bars, his mind racing. An island of only women. An empress. This world's rules were as strange as its sky. And this empress, she's the one in charge. Marguerite nodded, a flicker of awe in her eyes. "She is the pirate empress, Boa Hancock. Captain of the Kuja pirates, one of the 7 warlords of the sea, and the most beautiful woman in the world. Her will is law." He filed the information away. Pirate empress. Warlord. This was a world of titles and power structures he didn't understand. He needed more information, but he also needed to show he wasn't a threat. "Look, Marguerite," he said, keeping his tone even and calm. "I don't know how I got here. I was in a fight, a bad one, and then, I was in the water. I don't mean any harm to you or your people. My name is Naruto Uzumaki." She seemed to soften slightly at his directness. "I believe you, but it is not my decision. The Empress, she does not trust men. None of us do." Over the next few days, Marguerite was his only contact. She brought him food and answered his questions cautiously. He learned of the world outside this island, a world dominated by a sprawling world government, its military force the Marines, and the powerful pirates who ruled the seas, the 4 emperors. He learned of devil fruits, mystical fruits that granted strange powers at the cost of the user's ability to swim. It was a world of chaos, conflict, and strange, wondrous powers, not so different from his own, yet fundamentally alien. He spent his time meditating, patiently coaxing his ravaged chakra network back into order. Kurama was a constant, grumbling presence, his own vast energy slowly recovering. "This Hancock sounds like a troublesome woman," the fox commented, having listened to every conversation. "Prideful, arrogant. Be careful, Kit. When am I not?" Naruto shot back, a flicker of his old self returning. He didn't try to break out. He knew he was in no condition to fight an entire island of trained warriors, and besides, where would he go? He was a stranger in a strange land. For now, observation and patience were his greatest weapons. He watched the Kuja train, noting their fighting style. It was fluid and powerful, relying on kicks and acrobatics, enhanced by something they called haki, a spiritual energy that reminded him vaguely of senjutsu, but more personal, more focused. On the 5th day, the atmosphere on the island changed. A palpable tension filled the air. The guards outside his cell stood straighter, their faces a mask of nervous reverence. Marguerite had told him the Empress was returning. The footsteps echoed down the stone corridor long before she appeared. They were deliberate, regal, the sound of someone who owned the very ground they walked upon. When she finally entered his line of sight, Naruto understood Marguerite's awe. Boa Hancock was, without a doubt, the most stunningly beautiful woman he had ever seen. She was impossibly tall and slender, with long, dark hair and eyes that held a chilling, aristocratic disdain. She moved with the fluid grace of the giant snake that accompanied her, its massive head level with her waist. She was a queen, an empress, and she radiated an aura of power that was overwhelming. She stopped before his cell, looking down her nose at him as if he were something unpleasant she had found on the bottom of her shoe. The oath. Our Kuja behind her immediately averted their eyes, some blushing, others looking faint. So, her voice was like honeyed ice, this is the creature they pulled from the sea. A man. She said the word, man, as if it were a curse. Naruto met her gaze directly, his own blue eyes clear and unwavering. He had faced down gods and monsters, a beautiful, arrogant woman wasn't going to intimidate him. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. Hancock raised a delicate eyebrow, a cruel smirk playing on her lips. I do not care for your name. I care only for the fact that your filthy presence defiles my island. She struck a pose, leaning back dramatically and pointing a finger at him. Your very existence is a crime. For the transgression of being a man, you should be turned to stone. He felt a wave of energy wash over him, a strange, invasive force that sought to dominate his will. It was followed by a peculiar sensation, like his body was being assessed and found wanting. He stood his ground, confused but unaffected. He saw Marguerite and the others swoon, their hands clasped to their cheeks as they sighed, so beautiful. Hancock's smirk faltered. She stared at him, a flicker of disbelief in her eyes. Why are you not petrified? My beauty should have turned your lecherous soul to stone. Naruto just blinked. I'm sorry, I don't know what you're talking about. Is that one of those devil fruit powers Marguerite told me about? His honest confusion was, to her, the greatest insult. Her power, which had brought kings and pirates to their knees, had absolutely no effect on him. Her perfect face, which captivated all who saw it, meant nothing to this strange man in the cell. Her rage was a palpable thing. You dare mock me, she hissed, her eyes blazing. The air grew heavy, thick with a crushing pressure. It was an invisible force, a wave of pure willpower designed to shatter the spirit of lesser beings. Haoshoku Haki, the conqueror's spirit. Naruto braced himself. He recognized this pressure. He had felt similar auras from the likes of Madara Uchiha, a force of will so strong it could be weaponized. He stood firm, his own immense life force, bolstered by Kurama's, acting as a bulwark against the assault. He didn't bend. He didn't break. He simply met her oppressive will with his own unyielding spirit. The corridor fell silent. Hancock stared, her mouth slightly agape. The women behind her looked on in utter shock. No one had ever withstood the Empress's haki before. This man, this strange, orange-clad creature, was not just immune to her charms, but to her very will. For the first time in a very long time, Boa Hancock was intrigued. Her fury gave way to a cold, sharp curiosity. This anomaly could not be allowed to exist unchecked. You will be judged, she declared, her voice regaining its composure. In the arena, you will face my sisters, the Gorgons. We will see what power you truly possess. And when you are broken and defeated, I will have my answers. The arena was a massive coliseum carved from the mountain itself, open to the sky. Thousands of Kuja warriors filled the stands, their voices a low, hostile hum. Naruto stood in the center of the sandy floor, feeling the sun on his skin. They had given him back his pants, but his upper body was bare, revealing a tapestry of old scars crisscrossing a physique honed by a lifetime of relentless battle. He stretched his neck, feeling his newly recovered chakra flow more smoothly now. He wasn't at his peak, not even close, but he felt more like himself than he had since arriving in this world. Across the arena, two women entered. They were Hancock's sisters, as tall and imposing as the Empress herself, but with a more bestial, serpentine quality. The larger one, Boa Marigold, carried a massive polearm. The other, Boa Sandersonia, was leaner. Her movements more fluid and snake-like. So this is the man, Sandersonia hissed, her tongue flicking out. He doesn't look like much. We will crush him, sister, Marigold grunted, slamming the butt of her weapon onto the sand. For the glory of our Empress. Naruto took a low stance, his eyes darting between the two of them. He didn't want to kill them. This was a test, a judgment. He needed to show his strength, but also his character. Winning wasn't enough. He had to win the right way. The fight began with a deafening roar from the crowd. Marigold charged, a straightforward assault of brute force. Naruto met her head-on. He didn't try to block the polearm. He flowed around it, his movements economical and precise. He slapped the shaft aside, slid under her guard, and jabbed two fingers into the pressure point at her elbow. Her arm went numb, and she stumbled back in surprise, her grip on her weapon faltering. Sandersonia moved in from the side, a blur of green. Her hair contorted into the shape of snakes, striking at him like living whips. It was a strange and versatile fighting style. Naruto weaved through the strikes, the years of sparring, against countless opponents guiding his instincts. He was faster, more agile. He could see their movements before they made them, a benefit of his sage training that still lingered even without access to this world's natural energy. He needed to end this quickly. He formed a familiar hand sign, a swirl of blue chakra spinning to life in his palm. Rasengan. He didn't aim for a vital point. He surged forward, pushing the swirling sphere into the ground at Marigold's feet. The resulting explosion of force wasn't lethal, but it blasted her off her feet, sending her crashing into the arena wall, dazed and winded. One down. Sandersonia let out a furious hiss. You'll pay for that. She was a blur of motion, her attacks becoming faster, more vicious. She abandoned her hair snakes and engaged him in close quarters combat. Her hockey-infused kicks landed with the force of steel hammers, but Naruto's own body, conditioned by chakra, was more than durable enough to withstand them. He parried her blows, looking for an opening. He saw it in a split second. She overcommitted to a high kick, leaving her torso exposed. He could have ended it with a single, devastating blow. But as he moved, he saw something else. The force of her kick had torn the back of her dress. For a fleeting moment, a patch of scarred, burned skin was visible on her upper back, a strange, sun-like symbol. He saw the flash of sheer, unadulterated terror in her eyes as she realized what was happening. It was a terror that went beyond the fear of battle. It was the fear of shame, of exposure. In that instant, Naruto made a choice. He abandoned his counterattack. Instead of striking, he used his speed to move behind her, placing himself between her and the thousands of watching eyes. With his other hand, he grabbed He torn fabric of her dress and held it in place, covering the mark. The entire arena fell silent. Sandersonia froze mid-attack, her body rigid with shock. She slowly turned her head, her serpentine eyes wide with disbelief. He was right there, his hand on her back, his body shielding her from the crowd. He wasn't attacking. He was protecting her. What are you doing? She whispered, her voice trembling. You don't want them to see that, do you? Naruto said, his voice low and devoid of malice. Whatever it is, it's your business. Not theirs. From her high throne, Boa Hancock shot to her feet. Her face a mask of utter astonishment. That mark. The hoof of the soaring dragon. The brand of a celestial dragon slave. The symbol of her and her sister's deepest trauma and most guarded secret. A secret they would kill to protect. And this man, this outsider, in the middle of a battle for his life, had chosen to protect it. To protect her. The moment was broken by Marigold, who had Rico. Varidan now charged with a furious roar. But the fight was already over. Sandersonia stood down, her will to fight completely gone, replaced by a profound confusion. Naruto easily sidestepped Marigo. LD's clumsy attack and chopped her precisely at the base of the neck, sending her crumpling to the sand, unconscious but unharmed. He stood alone in the center of the silent arena, the victor. He hadn't brutalized his opponents. He hadn't gloated. He had fought with skill, precision, and in a final, incomprehensible act, with honor and compassion. The Kuja warriors in the stands looked at each other, their hostility replaced by a reluctant, burgeoning respect. This man was not like the stories they had been told. That night, Naruto was brought not to his cell, but to the opulent chambers of the Empress herself. Boa Hancock sat on her throne, her snake coiled at her feet. Her sisters stood beside her, their expressions unreadable. The arrogance was gone from Hancock's eyes, replaced by a sharp, calculating intensity. Why? She asked, her voice cutting through the silence. Why did you cover my sister's back? Naruto met her gaze. It looked important to her that no one saw it. I've had my own share of things I didn't want people to see. Everyone deserves to keep their own secrets. His simple, honest answer seemed to disarm her completely. She studied him for a long moment, her mind working furiously. This man was an enigma. He possessed a power she didn't understand. He was immune to her abilities. And he possessed a character that defied everything she thought she knew about men. He was not a brute. He was not a lecher. He was honorable. In this world of violent, Selfish men, a man of honor was a rarer and more valuable commodity than any treasure. He was also a potential weapon. Or a shield. Amazon Lily was a powerful nation, but it was still subject to the whims of the world government and the other great powers. An ally of Naruto's caliber could change everything. I have seen your strength. Naruto Uzumaki, she said, speaking his name for the first time. And your character. Both are unusual. She leaned forward, her expression deadly serious. I am making you an offer. This world is a dangerous place. You are alone and without allies. I am the empress of this island, a warlord of the sea. My enemies are numerous and powerful. I am offering you an alliance. Swear your strength to me, to the Kuja tribe, and you will have a home here. You will have my protection. We will face this world together. It was an offer born of pragmatism, but for Hancock, it was an unprecedented leap of faith. To ally with a man, to allow him to remain on her island, was to break every tradition she held sacred. But she was a queen before she was anything else, and her first duty was to her people. Naruto considered her words. He was alone. He was weak. He needed allies if he was going to survive, let alone figure out a way home, if that was even possible. He looked at Hancock, and beneath the layers of arrogance and beauty, he saw the same thing he saw in Tsunade, in Gaara. The heavy burden of leadership. The loneliness of the crown. He understood that. I accept, he said, his voice firm. I'll help you protect your people. On one condition. Hancock raised an eyebrow. You are in no position to make demands. I'm not asking for treasure or power, Naruto said. I'm asking for a promise. That this alliance is one of equals. I'm not your subordinate, and you're not my master. We'll be partners. For a moment, he thought she would refuse. Her pride was a formidable thing. But then, a slow, genuine smile spread across her face. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated amusement and respect. Partners, she mused, testing the word. Very well, Naruto Uzumaki. Partners it is. The pact was sealed. Naruto Uzumaki, the hero of Konoha, was no longer a prisoner. He was now the sole male resident of Amazon Lily and the sworn ally of the Pirate Empress. He had a foothold in this strange new world. But as he stood in the throne room, flanked by women who had tried to kill him just hours before, he knew his journey was just beginning. The waves of his arrival had already begun to spread, and a storm was brewing on the horizon. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. Whispers of the Wano Kingdom. Life on Amazon Lily settled into a strange and unexpected rhythm. Naruto was no longer a prisoner, but an anomaly, a respected oddity. The initial hostility of the Kuja warriors had melted away, replaced by a fierce, almost overwhelming curiosity. He would walk through the main town of Kuja and women would stop their work to stare, not with malice, but with a wide-eyed wonder, as if he were a creature from a myth. He became a fixture in their training grounds, his presence a catalyst for change. He trained with them, not as a teacher imposing his own style, but as a sparring partner unlike any they had ever known. He taught them about chakra control exercises, showing them how to walk on water and cling to vertical surfaces, simple tricks for a shinobi that were revolutionary for them. In return, they tried to teach him about hockey. For them, it was an innate spiritual force, something awakened. For Naruto, it felt like a cousin to the natural energy he used for Sage Mode, but more focused, more internal. He struggled to grasp it consciously, yet in the heat of a spar. He would sometimes instinctively coat his fist in an invisible armor or feel an opponent's intent a second before they moved. His senses, already honed to a razor's edge, were adapting. Hi's relationship with Hancock was a delicate, intricate dance. The Pirate Empress was, by her very nature, a creature of absolute authority. She was not used to partners. She would issue commands out of habit, only to have Naruto raise an eyebrow and offer a suggestion that was, more often than not, a better strategic move. He didn't challenge her authority directly, he simply acted as her equal. A quiet and unshakable confidence in his every action. It was maddening for her, and yet, she found herself respecting him for it. They would spend long evenings on her balcony overlooking the island, the massive serpent Salome resting nearby. He would tell her stories of his world, of tailed beasts and ninja villages, of friends and epic battles. He spoke of Jiraiya, of his parents, of the dream to become Hokage. He laid his soul bare, not for sympathy, but because it was the only way he knew how to be. Hancock, in turn, remained guarded, but she listened. She saw the weight of leadership he carried, a burden that mirrored her own, and a profound loneliness that resonated with the isolation of her throne. For the first time, she had found someone who did not want anything from her, not her beauty, not her power, not her wealth. He just wanted to stand beside her. It was a novel, terrifying, and exhilarating feeling. But the world outside their island sanctuary was not idle. Whispers traveled on the wind and the waves, carried by seagulls and nervous marine patrols. The impenetrable island of women, Amazon Lily, now harbored a man. Not just any man, but a warrior of impossible power. One who had defeated the Gorgon sisters and stood unbowed before the pirate empress herself. The news trickled up the chain of command, from nervous outpost captains to the vice admirals at Marine headquarters. In a sterile office overlooking the massive naval base of Marineford, a grim-faced man with a steel jaw and a perpetual scowl read the report for the 5th time. Vice Admiral Onagumo crushed the paper in his prosthetic hand. A man on Amazon Lily, he growled to the subordinate standing at attention. And Hancock allows it. This is a breach of her warlord duties. A flagrant disregard for the established order. Sir, the reports are incredible, the younger officer stammered. They say he appeared from nowhere. Some say he commands the storms, others that he can create an army from his own shadow. Rumors. Onagumo spat, though the consistency of the reports troubled him. What is Fleet Admiral Akainu's position? He is displeased. He sees it as a sign of Hancock's inevitable betrayal. He's considering revoking her warlord status and authorizing a buster call. The words hung in the air, cold and heavy. A buster call, the ultimate expression of the world government's military might. An indiscriminate, overwhelming assault designed to wipe an island from the map. It was a threat that kept even the most arrogant pirates in line. The threat reached Hancock's ears via a trembling messenger from a nearby Marine watch post, an unofficial warning sent out of fear of the pirate empress's wrath. She sat on her throne, the news settling over her like a shroud of ice. Her knuckles were white where she gripped the armrests. A buster call, for allowing one man to live on her island. The sheer, suffocating arrogance of the world government sent a wave of cold fury through her. That evening, she summoned Naruto to her private chambers. The air was thick with tension. The world government knows about you, she stated, her voice clipped. They see your presence here as a violation of our agreement. They are threatening to send a fleet to destroy my home, Naruto. To kill my people. Naruto's jaw tightened. He had seen the destructive power of war. The idea of this peaceful island being obliterated because of him filled him with a familiar, protective rage. Then we'll fight. I won't let them touch this place. Fighting a buster call is not a battle, it is a slaughter, Hancock countered. Her voice sharp with frustration. Even with your power, we would be overwhelmed. My people would die. No, we cannot win with force alone. We need legitimacy. We need a bond so strong, so undeniable, that the world government would risk global instability to break it. She rose from her throne and walked towards him, her movements deliberate, her gaze locked on his. Our current alliance is one of words. It is a secret, a whisper. To the world, you are a guest, a stray she has taken in. They think they can simply remove you. She stopped directly in front of him, so close he could see the flecks of gold in her dark, intense eyes. We must make them see that you are not a guest. You are a permanent fixture. You are part of the foundation of this nation. Naruto waited, sensing this was more than just a strategic discussion. This was personal. I propose, she said, her voice dropping to a low, serious tone, a marriage. The word hit him like a physical blow. Marriage. He stared at her, utterly speechless. His mind, which could process the complexities of a high-level battle in milliseconds, was completely blank. Hancock saw his shock and her pride bristled. Do not misunderstand me, she said quickly, a faint blush staining her cheeks. This is a political maneuver. A strategic union. As my husband, the prince consort of Amazon Lily, any attack on you is a direct act of war against my nation. It would bind you to us, and us to you, in the eyes of the entire world. It would give them pause. It is the only move we have. Naruto ran a hand through his spiky blonde hair, his mind reeling. Marriage. He had never seriously thought about it. His life had been one of constant crisis, of survival and fighting for his dreams. Romance was a distant, abstract concept, something for a future that had never seemed guaranteed. And now, he was being offered a political marriage to a pirate empress he had known for only a few weeks. Hancock. He started, but the words wouldn't come. He respected her immensely. He was even fond of her, in a way. He admired her strength, and he was beginning to see the vulnerability she hid beneath her prideful exterior. But marriage. Before he could formulate a response, a frantic guard burst into the throne room, her face pale. Empress. A ship. It has breached our perimeter and run aground on the eastern shore. It flies no flag we recognize. The tension in the room snapped. Hancock's proposal hung, unanswered, as they rushed to the scene. On the rocky beach, a ship lay battered and broken, its mast snapped, its hull gouged. It was a vessel of strange design, its lines elegant but its construction clearly non-traditional. On the sand, surrounded by wary Kuja warriors with arrows drawn, knelt a man. He was clad in a worn kimono, a katana resting on the ground before him. He was wounded, but his back was ramrod straight, his eyes full of a desperate, unyielding pride. I am Kinemon, a samurai from the land of Wano, he announced. His voice hoarse but strong, addressing Hancock as she and Naruto approached. I have sailed for weeks, seeking the aid of the famed Kuja pirates. My country is in peril. Hancock listened, her face an impassive mask, as the samurai explained. Wano, the closed-off country of samurai, was free from the tyrannical grip of the beast pirate, Kaido. But victory had left them vulnerable. The world government, which had long coveted Wano's resources and master craftsmen, was now circling like vultures. Marine ships massed off their coast, not attacking, but waiting, applying pressure. Demanding the country open its borders and submit to their authority. Wano's warriors were proud, but they were exhausted from their war of liberation. They were isolated and without allies. We heard tales, Kinemon said, his eyes finally landing on Naruto, taking in the man's powerful presence next to the Empress. Of a new power allied with the Kuja. A warrior who fights like a demon but with the heart of a hero. We have come to beg for your assistance. Help us preserve the freedom we have shed so much blood to win. Naruto listened to the samurai's plea, and something deep within him stirred. A closed-off nation of powerful warriors, fighting to protect their independence from a monolithic, encroaching power. It was the story of his own home, in a way. The hidden leaf, always fighting to maintain its autonomy against larger, more aggressive nations. He heard the echo of the old man, Hiruzen Sarutobi, speaking of the will of fire. He saw the proud defiance of Gaara, defending his village. This was a fight he understood down to his very bones. We will help you, Naruto said, his voice ringing with a conviction that startled everyone, including himself. Hancock turned to him, her eyes wide. He had just made a decision for them. Her first instinct was to be furious at his presumption. But then she saw the look on his face. It was not arrogance. It was a deep, unwavering empathy. It was the look of a leader who saw a people in need and could not turn away. She had seen that look before, in the arena, when he protected her sister. She made her decision. The Kuja do not bow to the world government, she declared, her voice resonating with royal authority. And we do not abandon those who fight for their freedom. We will sail for Wano. Then she looked directly at Naruto, a new, steely glint in her eyes. But we will do so as a unified front. My offer still stands. Decide before we reach their shores. The journey to Wano was a tense one. The Kuja's ship, the perfume Yuta, cut through the waves, the sea serpents at its prow creating a formidable wake. Naruto spent the time speaking with Kinemon, learning everything he could about Wano, its culture, its people, and its leader, Kazuki Momonosuke. He learned of Odin, the legendary samurai who had dreamed of opening Wano's borders to the world, and of his daughter, Hiyori, who carried his spirit. He also thought about Hancock's proposal. It was a logical, strategic move. But it felt hollow. He had seen political marriages in his world. They were often loveless, miserable affairs. Yet, as he watched Hancock command her ship, her every order obeyed without question, her concern for her crew evident in her sharp-eyed vigilance, he felt a growing admiration. This wasn't just about politics. It was about protecting a home. It was about responsibility. A responsibility he now shared. As the strange, mist-shrouded shores of Wano came into view, he found her looking out at the coastline. "I accept," he said quietly. She turned to him, her expression unreadable in the dim light of dawn. "You are certain?" "I am," he said. "This alliance needs to be unbreakable. Your people are my people now. We'll face whatever comes, together." A small, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. Good. Their arrival was met with deep suspicion. The port of Tokage was filled with samurai. Their hands resting on the hilts of their katanas, their faces grim. They were warriors who had just cast out one tyrant. They were not eager to welcome another, especially not a warlord of the sea, whose kind were known for their treachery. Kinemon led them to the flower capital, where they were brought before the ruling council, a group of 9 samurai in distinctive armor. They were the Red Scabbards, the legendary retainers of Kazuki Oden. Their leader, a tall man with a topknot, stepped forward. It was Kinemon. "I have brought the aid I sought," he announced. "The Empress Boa Hancock, and the warrior, Naruto Uzumaki." The samurai looked them over, their gazes lingering on Naruto. They felt the immense power radiating from him, an energy so potent it was almost a physical presence. It was not the brutish, demonic aura of Kaido, but it was overwhelming all the same. "We appreciate your coming," said a large man with a compassionate face, a former ninja named Raizo. "But Wano's fate will be decided by the strength of samurai. We must test the mettle of this man you have brought with you." Naruto expected this. "I understand," he said, stepping forward. "I will not ask for your trust. I will earn it." The duel was set in the main courtyard of the shogun's castle. Naruto faced not 1, but 3 of the scabbards. Kinemon, with his strange foxfire style, the massive Dogstorm, one of the rulers of the Mink tribe, and the stoic Cat Mink, Cat Viper. They stood against him, a united front of Wano's finest. The duel began. Kinemon's blade erupted in flames, but Naruto, a master of fire release jutsu, merely held up a hand, absorbing the heat with his chakra. Dogstorm was a whirlwind of speed and electricity, but Naruto's sage-enhanced reflexes were faster. He moved like a leaf on the wind, never where they expected him to be. Cat Viper attacked from the shadows, his claws glinting, but Naruto's sensory abilities pinpointed him instantly. He wasn't just dodging, he was analyzing, learning. He saw their pride, their honor, the core of Bushido in every strike. He wouldn't defeat them with overwhelming power. He would defeat them on their own terms. He created 2 shadow clones. The crowd of samurai gasped. One clone engaged Dogstorm, the other Cat Viper, mirroring their movements with uncanny precision. Naruto himself faced Kinemon. "Your swordsmanship is incredible," Naruto said, easily parrying a flaming strike. "But you rely only on what you can see." He closed his eyes. He let go of his traditional senses and let his connection to the world guide him. He could feel the flow of Kinemon's energy, the shift in his weight, the intent behind his next strike. He moved before Kinemon did, his foot sweeping the samurai's legs out from under him. Kinemon landed flat on his back, Naruto's open palm hovering an inch from his throat. Across the courtyard, his clones had similarly disabled their opponents without causing serious injury. Silence. Naruto opened his eyes and offered a hand to the stunned samurai. "You fought with honor." From a balcony overlooking the courtyard, a woman watched, her hands clasped before her. She was beautiful, with long, flowing teal hair and the graceful bearing of royalty. She was Kazuki Hiyori, the princess of Wano. She had seen the power of the strange warrior, but more importantly, she had seen his restraint. He had the strength to obliterate the scabbards, yet he had chosen to defeat them with respect. He fought not to dominate, but to understand. In him, she saw the same spirit her father, Oden, had possessed, a boundless strength married to an equally boundless heart. That evening, a formal meeting was held. The scabbards, their pride wounded but their respect won, listened intently. Naruto and Hancock explained the situation with the world government, the growing threat, the need for a united front. An alliance between Wano and the Kuja would be powerful, Kinemon admitted. But Wano is still healing. Our people are wary of outsiders. It was Hiyori who spoke next, stepping forward to address the council, her voice clear and strong. This man, Naruto Uzumaki, has shown us not only his power but his character. He fights for the freedom of others. This is the very spirit of Wano. An alliance is not enough. We must be bound together, our fates intertwined. Just as my father sought to join the world, we must now join with those who would be our true friends. She turned, her gaze falling upon Naruto. There was no hesitation in her eyes, only a calm, resolute sense of duty and a flicker of genuine hope. I will join this alliance. As a representative of the Kozuki clan, I will unite my future with his. I propose a second betrothal, binding Wano to this cause. Another marriage proposal. The room fell silent, all eyes on Naruto. Hancock stood beside him, her expression a complex mixture of surprise and cold calculation. She saw the strategic brilliance of the move. An alliance of Amazon Lily and Wano, cemented by personal unions to the same man, would create a new power block the world could not ignore. Naruto looked at Hiyori. He saw the weight of a nation on her shoulders, the same burden he saw in Hancock. She was a princess willing to sacrifice her personal freedom for the future of her people. It was a choice he understood all too well. To refuse would be to insult Wano and shatter the trust he had just earned. To accept was to tie himself even further to this world, to take on the fate of yet another nation. He looked from Hiyori's hopeful, determined face to Hancock's sharp, analytical gaze. He was no longer just Naruto Uzumaki, a lost shinobi. He was becoming a symbol, a king in all but name, the central pillar of a burgeoning federation born from a desperate need for survival. I accept, he said, his voice steady, echoing in the silent hall. For the future of Wano. He now stood betrothed to the Serpent Empress of the Kuja and the Princess of the Samurai. The whispers of his alliance were about to become a roar. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. The Desert Kingdom and the Shadow of the Government. The formation of the Kuja-Wano alliance sent a shockwave, not a roar. Through the clandestine channels of the world. It was a deep, seismic tremor felt in the shadowy halls of Mary Geoise and the cold, pragmatic offices of Marineford. Two isolationist powers, one a nation of warrior women, the other a country of master samurai, had bound themselves to an unknown entity of immeasurable power. Naruto Uzumaki. The name was now a file on Fleet Admiral Akainu's desk, a subject of intense debate among the five elders. They had moved from observation to active counterintelligence. The world could not afford another power block on the scale of the four emperors. In Wano, the alliance began to take shape. Kuja warriors trained alongside samurai, their fluid, hockey-infused kicks a strange but effective complement to the rigid, powerful forms of swordsmanship. Naruto acted as the bridge, his shadow clones serving as ideal sparring partners, able to replicate and adapt to any fighting style. He was the heart of this new coalition, his infectee. Al's optimism and unwavering resolve forging a genuine camaraderie between two deeply proud and disparate cultures. The change was most evident in his relationship with Hancock and Hiyori. They were two sides of a royal coin. Hancock, the fiery, absolute monarch who ruled through power and presence. Hiyori, the graceful, steadfast princess who led with the quiet strength of her heritage and the love of her people. They orbited Naruto, and by extension, each other, with a cautious curiosity. Their private dinners were a masterclass in subtle politics, each woman asserting her own importance and the importance of her nation in this new venture. The Kuja fleet will serve as the primary naval strength of our alliance, Hancock would state, her tone leaving no room for debate. Our ships know currents of the Grand Line better than any. And Wano's craftsmen will forge the weapons and armor for our soldiers, Hiyori would counter softly, her smile never faltering. A samurai's blade in the hands of a Kuja warrior would be a formidable thing indeed. Naruto, sitting between them, would simply nod and smile. That sounds great. We'll be unstoppable. His simple, earnest agreement had a way of deflating the tension, reminding them that they were, in fact, on the same side. He wasn't playing their game of political chess, he was building a family, whether they realized it yet or not. The idyllic period of integration was shattered one moonless night. Naruto was meditating on the roof of the shogun's castle, trying to sense the natural energy of this world. It felt different from his own, wilder, more chaotic, tinged with the sorrow of the sea. It was why his sage mode was taking so long to fully adapt. Suddenly, a flicker of killing intent, sharp and cold as a needle, pierced the tranquility of the capital. It was faint, suppressed by immense skill, but to his senses, it was a scream. And it was directed at Hiyori's chambers. He didn't hesitate. In a blur of yellow, he was gone, appearing inside the princess's rooms a second before the assassins struck. There were 3 of them, clad in black, their faces hidden by expressionless masks. They moved with a silent, inhuman grace that screamed elite training. One was already at Hiyori's bedside, a poisoned tanto raised to strike. Naruto's hand shot out, grabbing the assassin's wrist. The masked figure's eyes widened in shock. There was no sound, no warning. He had simply appeared. Naruto squeezed, and the sound of cracking bone was unnaturally loud in the silent room. The assassin didn't even have time to cry out before a Rasengan, small and controlled but devastatingly potent, slammed into his chest, sending him flying through the paper wall and into the garden, unconscious. The other 2 reacted instantly, their coordination perfect. One launched a flurry of finger pistol strikes, each jab sharp enough to punch through steel. The other became a blur, using the high-speed movement technique known as Soru. But they were fighting a ghost. Naruto moved between the attacks, a phantom in the dark. He disarmed one, broke the leg of the other, and subdued them both with precise, non-lethal strikes to their pressure points. The entire engagement lasted less than 5 seconds. Hiyori sat up, her hand at her throat, her heart pounding. The scent of ozone from Naruto's jutsu hung in the air. He stood over the paralyzed forms of the assassins, his expression cold and hard. The easygoing young man was gone, replaced by the veteran of 100 battlefields. Hancock and the scabbards burst in moments later, drawn by the commotion. They found Naruto standing guard, the would-be assassins neutralized. "Cipher Pole," Hancock said, her voice dripping with venom as she examined the insignia subtly stitched into the black uniforms. "The dogs of the world government. They didn't even wait for a declaration of war." Kanamon knelt, his face grim. "They are skilled. To have bypassed our guards so completely, this is the work of their finest." Naruto looked at the unconscious men, then back at Hiyori, who was now being tended to by a shaken handmaiden. This was a message, a declaration. The world government wouldn't fight them on the open seas. Not yet. They would bleed them from the inside, picking them apart with knives in the dark. A council was held at dawn. The mood was somber. "This was an act of terror," Dogstorm growled. "Wano will not stand for it. And what would you have us do?" Hancock countered, her arms crossed. "Sail to Marineford and declare war. They would crush us. We have the strength of warriors. But we lack the one thing the world government truly respects, political legitimacy." She was right, and Naruto knew it. In his world, the 5 great shinobi villages held councils, formed treaties. They had a political structure. Here, they were just a pirate crew and a rogue nation in the eyes of the world. They were powerful, but they were outlaws. "There is one place," Hancock continued, her sharp mind already 10 steps ahead. "A kingdom that is part of the world government, one of the original 20, in fact. Its rulers are respected, known for their benevolence and wisdom. But they have also been victims of the government's shadow games. They would understand our position. If they were to join us, to lend us their name and their voice at the reverie, it would change everything." "Where is this kingdom?" Naruto asked. "In the Grand Line," she said. "A vast desert nation. The kingdom of Alabasta." The plan was audacious. They would travel to Alabasta, not as conquerors or pirates, but as diplomats. Naruto, Hancock, and Hiyori would go together, a united front representing their new coalition. It was a risk. Leaving Wano while it was still being targeted was dangerous. But staying put and waiting for the next assassination attempt was suicide. They had to seize the initiative. The journey aboard the Perfume Yuta was a crucible for their new dynamic. The initial tension between Hancock and Hiyori was palpable. Hancock, accustomed to being the sole object of admiration, was clearly irritated by Hiyori's quiet grace and the easy way Naruto spoke with her. Hiyori, for her part, was unfailingly polite, but there was a core of Kazuki steel beneath her gentle exterior that refused to be intimidated by the pirate empress. One afternoon, they stood on the deck, watching the sea. "The samurai of Wano are proud," Hancock said, her words a subtle barb. "I hope their princess understands the complexities of dealing with the world government." It is not as simple as a duel in a courtyard. Hiyori's smile didn't waver. And I hope the Empress of the Kuja understands that true loyalty is not commanded, but earned through respect. A lesson Wano learned through great hardship. Before the exchange could escalate, Naruto stepped between them, holding 2 fishing rods. "Hey, you two are scaring the fish," he said with a grin. "Who wants to bet they can catch a sea king first?" His simple, disarming nature was like water on a fire. Within an hour, the 2 women were locked in a fierce, competitive fishing match, their earlier animosity forgotten in the heat of the moment. Their laughter echoing across the waves. He wasn't just their protector, he was their anchor, the calm center of their formidable storm. Their arrival in Alabasta was a stark contrast to Wano. The port city of Nanohana was a bustling, vibrant hub of trade. The air was hot and dry, filled with the scent of spices and sand. They were met not by grim-faced warriors, but by a contingent of the royal guard led by a man with a ridiculous corkscrew hairstyle, a garum, and a strikingly beautiful young woman with long blue hair and a warm, intelligent gaze. "Welcome to Alabasta," she said, bowing deeply. "I am Nefeltari Vivi, princess of this kingdom. My father awaits you in Alubarna." Vivi was everything they had been told: composed, astute, and carrying an aura of profound compassion. But Naruto, his senses on high alert, felt something else. He felt her weariness, the deep-seated worry of a ruler who had already saved her country from the brink once. She was welcoming, but her eyes were cautious. She remembered the last warlord, Crocodile, who had come offering aid and had nearly destroyed her home. They traveled to the capital, a magnificent city of white stone and grand plazas. As they were escorted through the streets, Naruto let his senses expand. He felt the life of the city, the bustling crowds, the happy children. But beneath it all, he felt a subtle, discordant hum. Pockets of malice. The feeling of being watched by eyes that held no warmth. It was the same feeling he'd had in Wano, but more diffuse, more skillfully hidden. They met with King Nefeltari Cobra, a wise and just ruler. Though his health was clearly failing, he listened to their proposal with great interest. An alliance of nations standing for freedom, independent of the world government's often corrupt authority. It was a dream he himself had harbored. "Your proposal is compelling," Cobra said, stroking his beard. "But Alabasta's stability is fragile. To openly defy the world government is a step I cannot take lightly." "We understand," Naruto said. "We're not asking you to declare war. We're asking you to believe that there's another way. A better way." As the diplomatic talks continued over the next day, Naruto's sense of unease grew. During a walk through the palace gardens with Vivi, he stopped. "Forgive me for asking, princess," he said, his voice low, "but does it feel to you like your city is holding its breath?" Vivi looked at him, surprised by his perception. "There have been incidents," she admitted. "Small things. A supply warehouse for the royal army mysteriously burns down. Rumors of dissent being spread in the outer villages. We can't find the source. It feels like we're fighting shadows." That night, it all clicked into place. While Hiyori and Hancock discussed strategy, Naruto created 1,000 shadow clones and dispersed them throughout the city, a silent, invisible net of information gatherers. The reports came back in a flood of memories. He saw men in dark suits moving through the sewers. He saw them planting strange devices near the base of the Grand Clock Tower in the center of the city. He overheard whispers of the speech and the signal. They were planning to attack during King Cobra's public address the next day, an attack designed to create mass chaos. And they were using cloaking technology that made them appear as Kuja and Wano samurai. They were going to frame the alliance. The next day, the Grand Plaza was filled with thousands of Alabasta's citizens, gathered to hear their king speak. Naruto stood on the royal balcony with Hancock, Hiyori, Vivi, and Cobra. He could feel them now, a dozen hidden presences, their killing intent masked but their hearts pounding with anticipation. "They're here," he whispered to Hancock and Hiyori. "They're going to hit the clock tower and the crowd. Make it look like us." Just as King Cobra approached the podium, the attack began. An explosion rocked the base of the clock tower. From the rooftops, figures dressed as samurai and Kuja warriors appeared, launching incendiary arrows into the panicked crowd below. It was a perfectly executed, devastating surprise attack. But they hadn't counted on Naruto Uzumaki. Now, he yelled. In an instant, the plaza was filled with 1,000 identical blonde-haired men in a surge of smoke. Shadow Clone Jutsu. The people of Alabasta screamed, but not in terror for long. The clones formed living walls, their bodies shielding the crowds from the arrows. Other clones raced up the sides of buildings, engaging the disguised assassins. The chaos was contained in a matter of seconds by an army that had appeared from a single man. Protect the king. Naruto ordered Hancock and Hiyori. Hancock didn't need to be told. Her eyes glowed with fury. She drew back her hand, forming a heart. Slave arrow. A massive volley of pink, heart-shaped arrows rained down on the assassins, turning them to stone mid-attack. Hiyori drew her father's legendary blade, Aim no Habakiri, and moved to stand before Vivi and her father, a single, immovable line of defense. Naruto himself focused on the leader. The man was different from the others, faster, stronger. He was a blur of motion. A master of Rokushiki. He appeared before the royal family, his leg a cutting arc of wind, Rankyaku. Naruto intercepted him, his forearm meeting the man's shin with a crack like thunder. The force of the impact shattered the balcony floor. The assassin stared in disbelief. His attack, which could slice through a warship's hull, had been blocked by bare flesh. That's enough, Naruto said, his voice dangerously low. He activated Sage Mode, the orange pigment appearing around his eyes. The world snapped into focus, a symphony of energy that he could see, feel, and touch. The agent's power, which had seemed immense, now felt like a candle against the sun. The fight was over before it began. Naruto was simply on another level. He was faster than Soru, his skin tougher than Tekai. He flowed around the agent's frantic attacks, and with a single, precise strike, he slammed the man into the ground, shattering the plaza stones and knocking him unconscious. In the sky above, a swirling, shuriken-like vortex of wind and chakra began to form in his hand, letting out a sound that tore at the very air. Wind style. Rasenshuriken. He didn't throw it at a person. He hurled it into the sky, where it detonated with the force of a small meteorite, the shockwave extinguishing every fire in the plaza and the sheer, overwhelming power of it serving as an undeniable statement. The plaza fell silent, the citizens of Alabasta staring in awe at the man who had single-handedly saved them. The evidence was clear. The attackers had been disguised, and Naruto and his allies had protected them. The world government's plot had not only failed, it had backfired in the most spectacular way possible. That evening, in the king's study, the mood was resolute. The captured, now unmasked agents had taken their own lives with hidden poison capsules, the mark of true fanatics. They tried to turn my own people against me and destroy a potential friendship, King Cobra said. His voice filled with a quiet fury. The world government I have served my entire life is not the one I see before me today. It has become a nest of vipers. He looked at Naruto, at the three powerful women standing with him, and saw the future. Alabasta will join your alliance. Then, he turned to his daughter. Vivi, the world is changing. To navigate the coming storm, our kingdom must be bound to this new current. Vivi stepped forward, her gaze meeting Naruto's. She had seen him command armies, wield godlike power, and, most importantly, put himself in harm's way to protect innocent strangers. He was the embodiment of the leader she had always strived to be. This wasn't just politics anymore. This was a shared dream. I understand, father, she said, her voice clear and strong. For the future of Alabasta, and for the hope of a better world, I will join this union. And so, a third pact was made. The Sages' Alliance was born, not in secret, but in a trial by fire, witnessed by thousands. The quiet ninja from another world now stood bound to the Empress of the Kuja, the Princess of the Samurai, and the hope of the Desert Kingdom. He was no longer a castaway. He was a king, a husband, a protector, and the most dangerous man in the world to the powers that be. Their shadow war had just begun. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. The Divine Adjudicator's First Move. The World Arnett of the Alabasta incident not through the carefully censored reports of the world government, but through the screeching headlines of the World Economic Journal. A massive, full-page photo showed Naruto, wreathed in the golden aura of his Kurama chakra mode, standing amidst 1,000 shadow clones, a protector of the innocent against a shadowy foe. Morgans, the news tycoon, had a field day. The Sages Alliance. A new power rises in the Grand Line. The headline screamed, Pirate Empress, Samurai Princess, and Desert Royalty unite under mysterious blonde warrior. World government agents implicated in failed terror plot. The news spread like wildfire, igniting conversations from the lowest pirate dens to the highest seats of power. On the Red Force, Shanks read the paper with a thoughtful smile. Taking a long drink of sake. In the revolutionary headquarters at Baltigo, Monkey D. Dragon stared at Naruto's picture, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. And in the Fleet Admiral's office at Marineford, Akainu burned the newspaper to ash with a magma-laced fist, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. The carefully maintained balance of the world had not just been tipped, it had been shattered. For the Alliance, the aftermath of Alabasta was a catalyst. They were no longer a secret pact, they were a declared entity. They needed a central base, a neutral ground to serve as their capital. They found it in an archipelago of floating islands, a geological marvel hidden within a perpetual storm belt in the New World, accessible only to the most skilled navigators. They named it the Conclave of the Ascendant. It was here that their nations truly began to merge. Samurai trained alongside Kuja, sharing techniques and philosophies. Alabastan scholars and tacticians worked with Wano's master smiths and engineers, designing new ships and new defenses. It was a flurry of hope and creation. At the heart of it all stood Naruto, Hancock, Hiyori, and Vivi. They formed the ruling council, a quadrumvirate of diverse strengths. Hancock was their military commander, her experience as a warlord and pirate captain invaluable. Vivi was their head of state and diplomacy, her political acumen navigating the treacherous waters of global opinion. Hiyori was the guardian of their culture and infrastructure, overseeing the master craftsmen of Wano and the integration of their people. And Naruto was their shield, their symbol, their undeniable center of power. He was the reason they could build this dream without being immediately crushed. But while they built their utopia, a far darker council was convening. In the Pangaea castle at Mary Geoise, the 5 elders stood before the empty throne. The air in the chamber was ancient and cold. Uzumaki Naruto, the tall, dreadlocked elder stated, his voice a low rumble. He appeared from nothing. His power is an anomaly. It does not conform to the known structures of devil fruits or hockey. He has unified 3 troublesome but significant nations. The bald, sword-wielding elder added, his charisma is a weapon as dangerous as his strength. He is breeding hope, and hope is the most virulent of plagues against order. His actions in Alabasta have made a mockery of our authority. He cannot be allowed to grow stronger. The eldest, a man with a long white beard and a gentle voice that belied his immense authority, looked towards the shadows behind the throne. The time for observation is over. The balance has been irrevocably broken. This, Sages Alliance, is a chaotic variable that threatens the divine order of the world. It must be judged. From the shadows, a figure emerged. They were tall and androgynous, clad in immaculate white and gold armor that seemed to hum with a faint, inner light. Their face was obscured by a polished, featureless golden helmet. They carried no visible weapon, yet they radiated an aura of absolute, unshakable power. It was not the wild, oppressive hockey of a conqueror, but something different. It was the cold, unyielding pressure of absolute certainty, of divine judgment. You summon me, my lords. The figure's voice was melodic, yet held no warmth. It was he sound of a perfectly tuned instrument. Divine adjudicator, the elder said. A weed has taken root in the garden of the world. It chokes the life from the order we have maintained for 800 years. Go, uproot it. Remind the world why the gods sit in the heavens and men toil on the earth below. The adjudicator knelt, placing a gauntleted fist over their heart. The will of the celestial dragons is my will. The divine order shall be restored. On the conclave of the Ascendant, the day was bright and clear. Naruto was sparring with Hancock, their movements a blur of color and power. He was trying to teach her how to sense his attacks without relying on observation hockey, to feel the flow of energy itself. Hiyori and Vivi watched from a pavilion, discussing trade routes. It was a moment of peace, a glimpse of the future they were fighting for. And then, the world went quiet. It wasn't a silence of sound. The birds still sang, the wind still rustled through the strange, floating trees. It was a silence of power. Hancock, poised to launch a hockey-infused kick, suddenly stumbled. The invisible armor that should have coated her leg was gone. The energy she always felt flowing through her, the very core of her strength, was muted, distant, like a radio signal lost in static. What is this? She gasped, looking at her hands as if they belonged to a stranger. Hiyori and Vivi felt it too. A sudden, profound weakness, a draining of the will. On a nearby training field, a Kuja warrior using a devil fruit power to transform her arms into wings suddenly reverted to her normal form and fell from the sky. Panic and confusion began to spread. Naruto felt it differently. Kurama let out a furious growl in his mind. Kit, something is wrong. My chakra, it feels like it's being smothered. Naruto's own senses, always reaching out, were suddenly constricted. His connection to the vibrant life energy of the conclave felt muffled. He looked up at the sky. A single figure was descending, not falling, but walking down an invisible stair of light. It was the divine adjudicator. They landed softly in the center of the main plaza, their golden armor gleaming in the sun. They did not look at the panicking soldiers or the stunned leaders. They looked only at Naruto. You are the anomaly, the adjudicator's voice echoed, not through sound, but directly in their minds. Naruto Uzumaki, you are the source of this chaos. Hancock moved to stand beside Naruto, her face pale but her eyes blazing with defiance. Who are you? What have you done to us? I am the will of the gods made manifest. The adjudicator replied, turning its featureless helmet towards her. And this is a field of divine order. Within this domain, the chaotic whims of men are silenced. The curses of the sea are negated. The arrogance of the spirit is humbled. Your power is an aberration. Here, you are simply a woman. A zone of nullification. A power that could simply turn off devil fruits and hockey. Naruto stared, his mind racing. This was an enemy unlike anything he had ever conceived. This wasn't a fight for territory or ideals. This was a fight against a fundamental law of this universe. Leave them out of this, Naruto said. Stepping forward, his own power felt sluggish, Kurama's chakra difficult to draw out, but his core, his own personal chakra and the natural energy he had absorbed, was still there. It was alien to this world's system, and therefore, less affected by its rules. Your fight is with me. You are correct, the adjudicator said. The weed must be pulled from its root. The adjudicator moved. It wasn't the explosive burst of Soru. It was a movement of pure, impossible efficiency. One moment they were 50 yards away, the next, they were in front of Naruto, a Han. D glowing with golden light aimed for his heart. Naruto's sage mode instinct screamed. He dodged, the blow grazing his side. It didn't feel like a physical strike. It felt like his very life force was being erased where it touched. He countered with a punch, but the adjudicator flowed around it, their movements perfect, analytical. This wasn't a brawler. This was a holy executioner. You still possess some profane energy. The adjudicator noted, its voice calm and curious. An unholy art. It, too, will be purged. Hancock tried to attack, lashing out with a kick, but without hockey, it was just a physical blow. The adjudicator didn't even look at her, a field of golden energy repelling her effortlessly. She was thrown back, landing hard. Hancock. Naruto yelled, his anger flaring. He formed a Rasengan, the swirling blue sphere of pure chakra, a stark contrast to the adjudicator's golden light. He thrust it forward. The adjudicator met it not with force, but with its open palm. The golden light intensified, and the Rasengan, a jutsu that could carve through mountains, simply dissolved. It unraveled, the chakra dispersing into nothingness. Your arts are meaningless before the divine order, the adjudicator stated. Naruto backed away, his mind working furiously. Brute force was useless. Standard ninjutsu was being negated. Kurama's power was being suppressed. What did he have left? Sage mode. Kit. Kurama roared. Natural energy. It's not from this world. It's not from you. It's from the planet itself. It can't be silenced. He was right. Naruto stood still, closed his eyes, and drew upon the wild, chaotic natural energy of this world. It flooded into him, raw and untamed. The orange pigment flared around his eyes. When he opened them, his pupils were horizontal bars. The world was no longer muffled. He could feel everything again, the life force of his friends, the cold, sterile energy of the adjudicator. The adjudicator tilted its head. A transformation. You draw upon the world's filth to empower yourself. A desperate, sacrilegious act. I call it being resourceful, Naruto shot back, and then he moved. He was faster now, his sage-enhanced taijutsu a blur of orange. He was no longer just a brawler. He was a master martial artist, his every blow precise and powerful. He didn't aim for the adjudicator's armor, but for the joints, the weak points. The fight became a dizzying dance of attack and counterattack. Naruto created a dozen clones. They attacked from all angles, forcing the adjudicator to divert its attention. While it was occupied, the real Naruto gathered natural energy, mixing it with the small amount of Kurama's chakra he could still access. He was creating a new kind of Rasengan, infused with the one power his enemy couldn't silence. He slammed the sage art, lava release Rasenshuriken into the adjudicator's back. The explosion was immense, a vortex of molten chakra and natural energy that vaporized a section of the floating island. For the first time, the adjudicator was thrown off balance. It stumbled forward, a crack appearing on its featureless golden helmet. It stood up, its calm demeanor finally broken. A sliver of genuine annoyance entered its voice. You resist judgment. You cling to your chaos. So be it. Witness the true face of order. The adjudicator raised its hands to the sky. The golden light around it intensified, creating a massive spear of pure, solidified energy. It was a weapon made not of matter, but of concept. A spear of absolute law, of divine enforcement. It radiated an energy that promised not just death, but utter erasure from existence. Naruto knew he couldn't dodge it. He had to meet it head-on. He held out his hands, and Kurama, fighting against the suppression, poured every ounce of power he could muster into him. A swirling, chaotic sphere of positive and negative chakra formed, a tailed beast bomb. Disappear, the adjudicator commanded, launching the spear of light. Go, Naruto roared, firing the tailed beast bomb. The two attacks met in the center of the plaza. For a moment, there was no sound. Only an impossible, blinding fusion of pure gold and chaotic purple. Then, the world exploded. The shockwave tore across the conclave. Entire floating islands crumbled, falling into the sea below. Naruto was thrown back, his chakra cloak ripped away, his body battered and bleeding. The adjudicator was also thrown back, its pristine white and gold armor now scorched and cracked, the light around it flickering. The nullification field wavered and died. Hancock felt her haki rush back into her, a feeling like drawing breath after nearly drowning. The other Kuja and Devil Fruit users felt their powers return. The adjudicator rose to its feet, looking at its own cracked gauntlets, and then at Naruto, who was being helped up by Hancock and Hiyori. It had not won. It had not lost. It had been met with equal force. This was not in its calculations. The anomaly is resilient, the adjudicator stated. Its voice once again a cold, analytical monotone. My judgment was incomplete. More data is required. It turned and began to ascend, walking its stairway of light back into the heavens. This is not over, Naruto yelled after it, his voice raw. The adjudicator paused, its faceless helmet looking down on them. The chaos you represent has been judged, its voice echoed in their minds. The divine order will not tolerate your existence. Surrender your power to the will of the gods, or it will be purged from this world. This is not a threat. It is a promise. And with that, it was gone. Silence descended on the ruined plaza, broken only by the groans of the wounded and the sound of chunks of their home falling into the ocean. Naruto, Hancock, Hiyori, and Vivi stood together, looking at the devastation. They had survived. They had fought the emissary of this world's gods to a standstill. But they all knew, with a cold, terrifying certainty, that this was only the beginning. They had faced pirates, marines, and assassins. Now, they were facing heaven itself. And heaven had just declared war. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. The Weight of 3 Crowns. The dust from the adjudicator's assault did not settle for weeks. The physical rebuilding of the conclave of the Ascendant began almost immediately, the combined industry of 3 nations working with a desperate fervor. Samurai and Kuja warriors cleared rubble alongside Alabastan engineers, their shared sweat and labor forging a more tangible bond than any treaty. But the psychological wounds were deeper, more difficult to mend. Fear, for the first time, had taken root in their floating sanctuary. They had faced a power that operated on a different plane of existence, an enemy who could strip them of their very essence with its mere presence. The nullification field had been a profound violation. For the Kuja, their haki was an extension of their will, a source of pride and strength. To have it snuffed out, like a candle flame, left them feeling naked and vulnerable. For the samurai, it was a deep spiritual insult, as if the very honor of their souls had been weighed and found wanting. The attack had said a fundamental weakness they never knew they had. Naruto felt this fear in the air, in the hushed conversations, in the way the guard's eyes now scanned the empty sky. He threw himself into the reconstruction efforts. His shadow clones a constant, ubiquitous presence, lifting heavy stones, repairing structures, and serving as tireless sparring partners to help the warriors regain their confidence. But it was a hollow effort. He could rebuild their homes, but he couldn't rebuild their certainty. The adjudicator had planted a seed of divine terror, a belief that they were defying an order so absolute that their struggle was not just doomed, but blasphemous. The weight of it all settled most heavily in the council chambers. The four of them, Naruto, Hancock, Hiyori, and Vivi, were no longer just leaders of an alliance. They were the guardians of a fragile hope. Their nights were consumed by strategy sessions, poring over what little data they had on their celestial foe, trying to devise a defense against an enemy who could rewrite the laws of physics at will. The nullification field is the primary threat, Vivi said, her finger tracing a diagram of the attack's area of effect. She had become their chief intelligence analyst, her sharp, organized mind a bulwark against the rising tide of fear. It seems to emanate directly from the adjudicator. If we can't neutralize it, any dire court engagement is a losing battle for our forces. But Naruto was able to use his sage mode, Hiyori countered, her voice calm and measured as always. He drew on the energy of the world itself. Perhaps our own people can be taught to do the same. Senjutsu is not a skill that can be learned overnight, Naruto interjected, his voice weary. It took me years of intense training with the toads. It requires a perfect balance of spiritual and physical energy. Most people who try are turned to stone. Hancock slammed her fist on the table, the sound cracking in the tense silence. So we are to hide behind you forever. The Kuja are not a people who cower behind a shield, no matter how strong. Her pride was deeply wounded, both as a warrior and as an empress. The memory of her powerlessness, of being thrown aside like a child, was a constant, burning humiliation. That's not what I'm saying, Hancock, Naruto said softly, his gaze meeting hers. I'm saying we have to be smarter. We can't fight their fight. We have to make them fight ours. It was in these moments that the true nature of their new relationships was forged. This was not a courtship, it was a war council. The political marriages, once abstract concepts, were now a stark reality. Naruto was husband to 3 rulers, each with a different temperament, a different philosophy of leadership, and a different way of processing the immense pressure they were under. With Hancock, it was a clash of fire and will. She was passionate, demanding, her emotions always close to the surface. She pushed him, challenged him, refusing to let him bear the burden alone. Even if her pride made it difficult to admit her own fears. Their arguments were storms, but they cleared the air, ending in a shared, grudging respect and a fierce, protective loyalty. With Hiyori, it was a connection of quiet strength and shared duty. She was the calm in the storm. She would approach him after a heated council meeting, a cup of tea in her hands, and speak not of battle, but of the people. She reminded him of what they were fighting for, of the lives that depended on their choices. Her faith in him was a quiet, unshakable anchor, a source of immense strength when his own resolve wavered. With Vivi, it was a partnership of mind and heart. She understood the geopolitical game better than anyone. They would spend hours hunched over maps, discussing supply lines, potential allies, and the political fallout of every decision. She saw the weight of his power not as a weapon, but as a responsibility, and she helped him understand how to wield it not just on the battlefield, but in the treacherous world of politics. She was his conscience, his strategist, his link to the ordinary people he had sworn to protect. One evening, this complex dynamic was put to a severe test. A ship, battered and flying a flag of truce, was allowed to approach the conclave. On its deck stood a man Naruto never expected to see again. Gecko Moria, one of the 7 warlords of the sea whom Naruto had only heard stories about, a grotesque, onion-shaped man with a sinister grin and the power to control shadows. He had been a vicious and cruel pirate, an enemy to many. And his presence at their shores was an immediate alarm. He was brought before the council, shackled and surrounded by elite Kuja guards. He wasn't a prisoner, however. He was a supplicant. The world is turning upside down. Moria rasped, his usual cackling tone replaced by a grim seriousness. The world government is cleaning house. They tried to eliminate me after the war at Marineford. And now they're hunting down anyone they can't control. They sent one of them after me. He shuddered, a genuine, deep-seated fear in his eyes. A golden monster. It took my entire zombie army, my ship, it took my shadow. He held up his hands, and Naruto saw that he cast no shadow on the floor. It was an eerie, unnatural sight. I have nowhere else to go, Moria pleaded, his eyes darting between the 4 leaders. The Marines want me dead. The emperors would kill me for sport. You are the only power standing against them. I'm not asking for a place in your ranks. I'm asking for asylum, protection. In exchange, I will tell you everything I know about the world government's inner workings, their secret weapons, their monsters. Silence descended upon the throne room. The moral implications of Moria's request were a palpable weight. Hancock was the first to speak, her voice dripping with contempt. Absolutely not. This man is a pirate, a thief, and a defiler of corpses. He has preyed on the innocent for decades. To give him shelter would be to stain the honor of this alliance. We should execute him and send a message. I agree, Hiyori said, her tone gentle but firm. Wano has suffered too much at the hands of pirates like him. We cannot offer sanctuary to the very evil we fought to cast out. It would be a betrayal of our people's trust. Vivi, however, was more conflicted. She looked from Moria's desperate face to Naruto. His information could be invaluable, she argued, ever the pragmatist. He has seen one of the holy knights in action. He might know something about their abilities, their weaknesses. Can we afford to throw away such an advantage out of principle? All 3 of them turned to look at Naruto. This was not a military or political decision, it was a moral one. It was a question of what kind of nation they were building. Was it to be a bastion of absolute justice, or a pragmatic coalition of survival? His voice would be the deciding vote. Naruto looked at Gecko Moria. And he didn't see a warlord. He saw a broken man, stripped of his power, running for his life. He remembered Nagato, a villain who had destroyed his village but who had, in the end, sought a path to peace. He remembered Obito, a man who had plunged the world into war out of love and grief. He believed in second chances. He believed that no one was beyond redemption. It was the core of his entire philosophy. The very foundation of his ninja way. But then he looked at Hancock, Hiyori, and Vivi. He saw the faces of rulers who had seen firsthand what men like Moria did to the innocent. Hancock's past was scarred by the cruelty of the celestial dragons. Hiyori had watched her country suffer for 20 years under the boot of Kaido and his forces. Vivi had nearly lost her entire kingdom to the machinations of Crocodile. Their justice was not an abstract philosophy, it was a hard-won shield forged in the fires of real-world suffering. Who was he, an outsider, to tell them their pain was less important than his ideals? The weight of their 3 crowns, the history and pain of their people, pressed down on him. For the first time, his simple, black and white view of the world was confronted with an impossible shade of gray. We will not kill him, Naruto said, his voice quiet but resolute. The women looked at him, surprised. And we will not give him sanctuary. Not yet. He walked down from the dais and stood before the chained Moria. I will make you a deal, Naruto said, his blue eyes locking onto the former warlords. You will be given a place to stay. You will be fed and treated. In return, you will tell us everything you know. You will hold nothing back. But you will not be a citizen of this alliance. You will be a prisoner. Your asylum is conditional. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a low, intense whisper. And then, you're going to work. You're going to help us rebuild what was destroyed. You're going to use whatever strength You have left to help the people you once would have preyed upon. You're going to earn your place in the light. And if you ever, for 1 second, return to your old ways, I will personally erase you. That's my offer. Take it or leave it. Moria stared into Naruto's eyes, and for the first time, his cynical, selfish heart felt a flicker of something other than fear. It was a terrifying, unwelcome glimmer of hope. He saw no deception, no trickery, just an unwavering, absolute conviction. I accept, Moria croaked. The decision sent ripples through the conclave. Some hailed it as an act of profound mercy and strategic genius. Others, particularly among the samurai and Kuja hardliners, saw it as a sign of weakness, of a leader too soft to make the hard choices. Naruto felt the division he had created, a fracture in their perfect unity. That night, he stood on his balcony, looking out at the shattered islands floating in the moonlight. He felt a presence behind him and turned to see Hancock, Hiyori, and Vivi standing there. You were wrong, Hancock said, her voice devoid of its usual fire. It was just a statement of fact. Your mercy is a liability. It will be seen as weakness. Your compassion is noble, Hiyori added softly, but a ruler must sometimes be the hand of justice, not the heart of forgiveness. You have given our enemies a reason to doubt our resolve. Vivi was the one who came to stand beside him. They're right, she said, her voice laced with a deep sympathy. But I also think it was the only choice you could have made. It's who you are, and that is the man we chose to follow. Naruto looked at the three of them, the three most powerful women in his life, his wives, his queens, his partners. One challenged his ideals, one questioned his judgment, and one affirmed his character. He realized, in that moment, that this was the true weight of leadership. It wasn't about being the strongest or always being right. It was about making the impasse. BLE choices and living with the consequences. It was about balancing the fire of justice, the serenity of tradition, and the sharp edge of pragmatism. Maybe you're right, he said, looking back out at the horizon. Maybe I am too soft. But if we become the same monsters we're fighting against, then what's the point of fighting at all? His words hung in the air, a question that none of them could answer. They stood there in silence for a long time, four rulers under the light of a fractured moon, bound together not just by politics and power, but by the shared, terrifying burden of building a new world on the ashes of the old. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. The Summit of the Sage King. The world did not react to the formation of the Sages' alliance with a declaration of war. It reacted with something far more dangerous, a deafening, calculated silence. The world government issued no statements. The Marines made no moves. The five elders remained sequestered in their holy land. It was the silence of a predator gathering its strength before the kill, a stillness that was more terrifying than any open threat. They were being isolated, painted as a rogue state, their legitimacy choked before it could draw breath. Vivi, with her profound understanding of global politics, recognized the strategy immediately. They're erasing us from the conversation, she explained during a tense council meeting. Her hands spread over a map of the world. If they don't acknowledge us, then in the eyes of the world, we don't exist. Any nation that communicates with us will be branded a traitor. They're building a cage of silence around us. And when we're sufficiently isolated, they will strike. Then we will not be silent, Hancock declared, her voice ringing with defiance. We will force them to speak our name. We need to break their narrative, Naruto agreed, his gaze fixed on the map. He wasn't just seeing islands and oceans, he was seeing people, nations, families, all caught in the balance. We can't let them define who we are. We have to define ourselves, on our own terms, in front of the whole world. The idea was born from that necessity. It was audacious, reckless, and utterly brilliant. They would not wait for the world to come to them. They would summon the world. They would host a summit, a grand conference on a neutral island, and invite every major power on the planet to attend. The four emperors, the Revolutionary Army, the Marines themselves. It was a declaration that they were not merely a rogue state or a new pirate crew. They were a global power, and they demanded a seat at the table. The announcement was made through a captured transponder snail, broadcast on every open channel, and followed by a special edition of the World Economic Journal that Morgans, smelling the story of a lifetime, had been only too happy to print. The chosen location was the island of Elysia, a place of myth, a neutral territory for centuries, protected by strange magnetic fields and treacherous currents that made it accessible only to the most skilled crews. The message was clear: if you are powerful enough to reach us, you are powerful enough to speak with us. The preparations were immense. The conclave poured its resources into securing Elysia. Hiyori oversaw the construction of a grand pavilion, a neutral space built with the clean, elegant lines of Wano architecture. Alabastan ships, laden with supplies, created a logistical network that kept the nascent state functioning. It was a massive gamble. They were exposing themselves, gathering all their most important assets in one place. A tempting target for any foe. But as Naruto watched Hancock drill the combined Kuja samurai fleet with ruthless efficiency, and Vivi brief their diplomats on the intricate political histories of every potential guest, he knew it was the only move they could make. They had to trade the illusion of safety for a chance at true legitimacy. The first to arrive were the pirates. Not all at once, but in a slow, tense trickle. Remnants of the Whitebeard pirates, crews from the worst generation, even a gaudy, cake-themed ship from the Big Mom pirates, carrying not the Empress herself, but one of her elder sons. A tall, severe man who came to observe and report. The air on Elysia grew thick with suspicion, 100 different ambitions and grudges packed into a small, volatile space. Naruto, flanked by his wives, greeted each one personally. He wasn't a king receiving tribute. He was a host welcoming guests, his easy confidence and genuine smile disarming even the most hardened killers. He projected a power that didn't need to posture, and the pirates, who understood strength above all else, afforded him a cautious respect. Then, the red force appeared on the horizon. The sight of the single, unassuming ship sent a ripple of awe and fear through the assembled fleet. The red-haired emperor, Shanks, had come in person. His ship dropped anchor, and he came ashore in a small boat. His senior officers behind him. He wore his usual simple clothes and straw sandals, his famous hat missing, a friendly, almost lazy smile on his face. But no one was fooled. The sheer pressure of his haki was a physical weight on the island, a casual announcement of his presence that dwarfed everyone else's. He walked directly to Naruto, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "So, you're the one causing all this trouble," Shanks said, his voice warm and jovial. "You've got a lot of guts, kid. I like that. Thanks for coming, Shanks," Naruto replied, matching his relaxed demeanor. He felt a strange sense of familiarity with this man, an echo of the laid-back power he had known in his sensei, Jiraiya. Figured it was time everyone sat down and talked instead of just punching each other. Shanks let out a booming laugh. If only it were that simple. He looked past Naruto to Hancock, Hiyori, and Vivi, giving them a respectful nod. "You've built something impressive here. And you've made some powerful enemies. The best kind to have," Hancock said coolly, her own conqueror's haki subtly pushing back against Shanks's, a silent declaration that she was also a ruler here. Later that day, they met privately in a small tent overlooking the sea, sharing a bottle of sake that Shanks had brought. It wasn't a negotiation, it was a conversation. Shanks was curious, a historian and a guardian of the world's balance. He asked Naruto about his home, his powers, his reasons for being here. He listened intently, his gaze never wavering. "This chakra of yours, it's a new song in the world," Shanks mused, swirling the sake in his cup. "And you have a habit of drawing people to you. It's a dangerous, powerful quality. The most dangerous, in my opinion." He grew serious, his eyes seeming to look right through Naruto. "That's why they fear you so much. The ones in the shadows, the ones who pull the strings of the world government. You're a variable they can't control. They'll end more than just an adjudicator after you. They'll send their gods. We'll be ready for them," Naruto said, his voice firm. "I hope so," Shanks said. "Because the storm that's coming, it's going to swallow the whole world. And one other thing, kid." He leaned forward, his voice dropping. "Watch out for Blackbeard. Teach is making his move. He's hunting for power, and you're the biggest prize this world has seen in a long time." The friendly emperor was gone, replaced for a moment by the hardened veteran of 100 wars. The second visitor was not so open. That night, as a storm raged on the horizon, A figure appeared in Naruto's private quarters. He was tall, cloaked, his face hidden by shadows and a strange, geometric tattoo. Sabo, the chief of staff of the Revolutionary Army. Uzumaki Naruto, Sabo said, his voice tense. My leader wishes to speak with you. Naruto was led through a hidden path to a secluded cove where a strange, black-sailed ship waited. On its deck stood the most wanted man in the world, Monkey D. Dragon. The wind whipped his dark cloak around him, and his face was a grim, unreadable mask. The pressure he emitted was different from Shanks's. It was not the warmth of a sun, but the cold, immense power of a storm front. This was a meeting of ideologies. You have created a kingdom, Dragon stated, his voice a low growl that seemed to compete with the thunder. With queens and princesses, you prop up the very systems we seek to tear down. I protect people, Naruto countered, the rain plastering his blonde hair to his head. I don't care what you call the system as long as the people in it are safe and free. Your revolution. How many innocent people have been caught in the crossfire of your wars? Freedom has a cost, Dragon said, his eyes intense. The celestial dragons have ruled for 800 years through systematic oppression. You cannot negotiate with tyrants. You must burn them out, root and stem. You can't burn down the whole world to get rid of a few bad weeds. Naruto shot back, his own passion rising. You'll just be left with ash. I'm showing people that there's another way. A way to build something better without destroying everything first. They stood in the pouring rain, two men with the power to shake the world, locked in a battle of wills. It was not a confrontation of enemies, but of two different paths to the same goal. Dragon saw Naruto's methods as naive, a compromise with a corrupt system. Naruto saw dragons as dangerously absolute, a path that sacrificed the present for a future that might never come. We share a common enemy. Dragon conceded finally, the storm seeming to calm as his intensity lessened. For that reason, we will not be your foe. But we will not be your ally. We will watch, and see if your kingdom of hope can survive in a world of harsh realities. As he turned to leave, he paused. That power of yours, it feels familiar. It carries the same echo as the D. Be careful, that name carries a fate that a storm always follows. The final arrival was the most dramatic. A fleet of 20 marine battleships, a force large enough to initiate a buster call, appeared on the horizon. They didn't anchor. They created a blockade, their cannons a silent threat to the entire island. A single vessel came forward, and from it emerged Fleet Admiral Akainu himself, flanked by Admiral Kizaru. Akainu's face was a thundercloud of righteous fury. His very presence seemed to make the air hotter. The main summit began in the open-air pavilion. The pirates, the revolutionaries in disguise, and now the marines, all gathered. Akainu did not sit. He stood before the central table where Naruto, Hancock, Hiyori, and Vivi were seated, his magma-laced fist smoking slightly. This farce is over. Akainu's voice was a low growl of molten rock. This gathering of criminals, this so-called Sage's alliance, is an affront to justice. You are a cancer on the world, Uzumaki Naruto. And I am the cure. Justice. Vivi stood, her voice clear and ringing, not with fear, but with cold, regal anger. Was it justice when your agents tried to incite a civil war in my country? Was it justice when you attempted to assassinate Princess Hiyori in her own home? Your absolute justice is nothing more than the tyranny of the powerful. We are here to offer an alternative. The alternative to order is chaos. Akainu roared. Pirates and traitors have no right to speak of justice. I will burn you all from the world and restore true order. The tension was about to snap. Shanks, sitting nearby, rested his hand on the hilt of his sword. Sabo tensed in the crowd. Akainu raised a fist, magma dripping to the floor, sizzling on the polished wood. And then, the sky broke. It was not the adjudicator. It was a squadron, 10 figures, clad in a new, more angular form of the white and gold armor, descended from the heavens. Their helmets were not featureless, they were styled after fearsome beasts. And they carried weapons, long spears that pulsed with a sickly green light and shields that shimmered with an invisible energy. They were an upgraded, militarized force of holy knights. Their leader, wearing a helmet shaped like a dragon's skull, pointed a spear downwards. By the will of the celestial gods, All who stand on this island are guilty of high treason. The sentence is erasure. They attacked not just the summit table, but everyone. It was indiscriminate slaughter. The spears fired beams of the green energy, and wherever they struck, they didn't just explode, they seemed to corrupt. A pirate who was hit screamed as his body began to petrify, not into stone, but into a strange, crystalline substance. The nullification field returned, but it was different. It was projected from the knight's shields, creating overlapping zones of powerlessness. Chaos erupted. Pirates who relied on their devil fruits were suddenly rendered useless. Hockey users found their spiritual armor faltering. This was the moment the world held its breath. Shanks and his crew moved instantly. Protect the island, Shanks roared, drawing his sword. He didn't need a devil fruit. His pure, overwhelming hockey was enough to shatter the energy beams before they could hit him. His crew, a force of nature in their own right, became a whirlwind of steel and power, defending not just themselves but the weaker pirate crews around them. Sabo and the revolutionaries struck from the shadows, their goal not to fight a pitched battle, but to sow chaos among the knights' ranks, to break their formation. Akainu's response was brutal and absolute. Eliminate them all, he bellowed to the marine fleet. The pirates, the revolutionaries, and these things. Burn this island until nothing remains. Cannonballs began to rain down, adding to the maelstrom. It was a free-for-all, a bloody, multi-sided war. Amidst the chaos, the Holy Knights focused their primary assault on Naruto. They had learned from the adjudicator's failure. 4 of them surrounded him, their seastone-laced spears glowing. They weren't just trying to kill him, they were trying to drain him. The energy from their weapons was specifically tuned to disrupt and poison his chakra. He activated his Kurama avatar, the massive golden fox erupting into existence, but the moment it appeared, the knight's spears lanced out, piercing its form. The avatar roared in pain, flickering violently. This new technology could harm him, even in his most powerful state. Naruto, Hancock, Hiyori, and Vivi screamed in unison. They fought to get to him, a queen, a princess, and an empress. A terrifying trio of battle-hardened royalty. Hancock's arrows turned knights to stone outside the nullification fields, Hiyori's blade cut through their armor with Odin's legendary strength, and Vivi, using a strange rope-like weapon and her incredible agility, coordinated their movements, a field commander in the heart of the storm. Naruto felt his power being siphoned, the avatar groaning under the strain. He saw the chaos, the indiscriminate destruction from the marine bombardment, the desperate fights for survival. This summit, his grand gesture of peace, had turned into a bloodbath. His anger, cold and immense, rose up to meet the chaos. He dismissed the failing Kurama avatar, dropping to the ground in his sage mode. Fine, he growled, the orange pigment stark around his eyes. You want to fight chaos with chaos? Let me show you how it's done. He slammed his palms on the ground. Sage art. Wood release. Deep forest emergence. The entire island of Elysia groaned. Massive, writhing trees erupted from the ground, a forest born in an instant. But these were not normal trees. They were infused with sage chakra, living, semi-sentient things. They grew with impossible speed, not just to attack, but to protect. They formed wooden walls to block the marine cannonballs. They created domes over terrified groups of pirates. They entangled the Holy Knights, their living branches immune to the nullifying fields. In seconds, Naruto had completely changed the battlefield, separating the combatants and creating pockets of safety. It was not a jutsu of destruction. It was a jutsu of absolute control. He then created 1,000 shadow clones. They swarmed the battlefield, each one a sage-level warrior. They reinforced the wooden walls, rescued the injured, and engaged the Holy Knights, their frog kataijutsu a fluid, powerful counter to the Knights' rigid, technological fighting style. Naruto himself, the real Naruto, appeared before the dragon-helmed leader. Your turn, he said, a Rasenshuriken already screaming in his hand. The battle raged for another hour, a desperate, grinding conflict. The Holy Knights were powerful, their technology formidable, but they were rigid. They were a scalpel trying to operate in a hurricane. Naruto's forces were the hurricane, chaotic, unpredictable, and overwhelming. Finally, seeing their formation be broken and their primary target still standing, the knights retreated, ascending into the sky as quickly as they had come. They left behind a ruined island and a stunned, bloodied collection of the world's most powerful people. Akainu, his face black with soot and fury at having failed to eliminate a single one of his major targets, ordered a retreat. The marine blockade pulled back, leaving the smoldering island behind. Shanks walked over to Naruto, who stood amidst the wreckage of his wooden forest, his sage mode fading. The Emperor had a fresh cut on his cheek, but he was smiling. "You're a real piece of work, kid," he said, his voice filled with a profound respect. "You didn't just win a fight. You protected everyone while doing it." He clapped Naruto on the shoulder before turning to his ship. "The world is changing. I'm glad you're on our side of the wave." The summit was over. As the various crews began to limp away from Elysia, Naruto stood with Hancock, Hiyori, and Vivi, surveying the devastation. They had survived. They had proven to the entire world that they could stand against the full might of Heaven's enforcers and hold their ground. The Sages' alliance was no longer a whisper. Its name was now etched onto the world map in fire and blood. But as a strange, deep tremor ran through the very bedrock of the island, a vibration that felt ancient and impossibly vast, Naruto knew their victory was fleeting. The energy unleashed here today had been immense. It was a dinner bell rung in the darkest depths of the world. And something had just woken up. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. Echoes of the Void Century. The summit of the Sage King, as the world was now calling it, had left a scar not just on the island of Elysia, but on the global psyche. In the conclave of the Ascendant, the victory felt hollow. They had stood their ground, yes. They had proven their power to the world's elite. But the cost was a deep-seated paranoia that now haunted their floating islands. The sky, once a symbol of freedom, was now watched with a constant, nervous apprehension. Every strange cloud, every distant flock of birds, was a potential harbinger of golden armor and divine judgment. The most unsettling after-effect was the tremor. It had been felt in the final moments of the battle at Elysia, a deep, sub-oceanic shudder that had no geological explanation. It was felt again, a week later. A brief but profound vibration that seemed to emanate from the very core of the planet. Alabasta's finest seismologists and Wano's mystics were equally baffled. It was as if something impossibly large had stirred in its sleep. This pervasive unease drove a new wave of exploration. Under Hancock's command, the combined fleet began an aggressive, systematic patrol of the seas surrounding the conclave. They were no longer just defending their home. They were hunting for answers, searching for any anomaly that might explain the new threats they faced. The discovery came from a Kuja scout ship, captained by a young warrior named Ran. Her report was breathless and confusing. An island had appeared where none had existed before, roughly 50 nautical miles from the conclave's outer perimeter. It wasn't on any chart, ancient or modern. It seemed to have risen from the seabed, a jagged black spire of rock that pulsed with a strange, unnatural energy. The tremor, she reported, was strongest near its shores. A small expedition was assembled immediately. It was not a military force, but a team of specialists. Naruto went as their shield and their primary sensor. Hiyori accompanied him, her knowledge of Wano's ancient history and its connection to the poneglyphs indispensable. Vivi joined them, representing Alabasta's centuries of preserved knowledge and her own sharp, analytical mind. Hancock, with a grim reluctance, remained behind to command the fleet. Their leadership was now a well-oiled machine. They divided their strengths, trusting each other implicitly to handle their respective roles. As their small, swift vessel approached the new island, a profound silence fell over the crew. The place felt wrong. The rock was a non-reflective, obsidian-like material that seemed to drink the sunlight. No birds circled its peaks. No sea life swam in the unnaturally calm waters at its base. It felt like a tomb. "The air here is old," Hiyori whispered, her hand resting on the hilt of her father's sword. "It feels lonely." Naruto, standing at the prow, closed his eyes. He reached out with his senses, not for chakra, but for the life force of the island itself. He found nothing. It was a void, a dead zone in the vibrant tapestry of the world. But beneath the deadness, deep within the rock, was a faint, rhythmic pulse. It matched the tremors. It was the slow, steady heartbeat of something ancient and asleep. They made landfall on a beach of black sand. As they stepped ashore, the air grew heavy, thick with static electricity that made the hairs on their arms stand up. They moved cautiously, following the source of the strange energy pulse. The island was a maze of sharp, geometric rock formations that looked less like the product of nature and more like the ruins of a colossal, forgotten city. As they rounded a towering megalith, they stopped dead. A lone figure was standing before a sheer cliff face, their back to them. A woman with long, black hair, dressed in practical, dark clothing. Her hand was resting on the rock, her head bowed as if listening to it. Vivi gasped, her voice a shocked whisper. Robin. The woman turned. It was Nico Robin, the devil child. The sole survivor of Ohara and the only person in the world who could read the language of the poneglyphs. Her face, usually composed and slightly melancholic, was filled with a profound, scholarly awe. She was not surprised to see them. Princess Vivi, Robin said, her voice calm. I had a feeling I might see you here. Her eyes shifted to Naruto, her gaze sharp and analytical. So, you are the one the world is talking about. The Eye of the Storm. What are you doing here? Hiyori asked, her hand still on her sword, her posture wary. Wano's isolation had made its people deeply suspicious of outsiders, especially ones with a reputation as notorious as Robin's. The same thing you are, I imagine, Robin replied, turning back to the cliff face. Seeking the truth. When the tremors began, they created a unique seismic signature, a pattern I recognized from a fragment of text I uncovered in Ohara's library before it burned. A text that spoke of the resonance of the earth. It led me here. She pressed a section of the rock, and a low grinding sound echoed through the eerie silence. A section of the cliff face slid away, revealing a dark, yawning opening. This island is not a natural formation. It is a library, and it has a story to tell that the world government has spent 800 years trying to erase. Vivi looked at Naruto and Hiyori, a silent conversation passing between them. They needed to know what was in there. Vivi had trusted Robin once, during the fight for Alabasta, and that trust had been rewarded. She nodded. They followed Robin into the darkness. The passage sloping downwards into the heart of the island. The air grew colder, and the rhythmic pulse that Naruto had sensed grew stronger, becoming a low, sub-audible hum that vibrated in their bones. The passage opened into a vast, circular chamber, lit by a faint, internal luminescence. In the center of the chamber stood a single, colossal poneglyph. But it was unlike any Hiyori or Vivi had ever seen described. It was not merely carved stone. Veins of a pale, blue, crystalline material snaked through the black cube, pulsing in time with the heartbeat they all felt. It was an artifact of impossible, ancient technology. I have been translating for 2 days, Robin said, her voice filled with a reverence that bordered on religious fervor. She ran her hand over the ancient text. This is not a history of a weapon, or a kingdom. This is a history of the world itself, of its very nature. As Robin began to speak, to translate the elegant, complex characters, Naruto stepped closer to the poneglyph. The blue veins of light seemed to react to his presence, glowing brighter. He placed his hand on its cool surface. The moment his skin made contact, his mind exploded. It was not a vision, it was an experience. He was no longer in the chamber. He was adrift in a sea of raw, untamed energy. He saw the world in its primordial state, a maelstrom of life force. He felt the planet's consciousness, a vast, dreaming, slumbering entity. He felt it dream, and from its dreams, life itself took shape. This poneglyph is older, so much older, Kurama's voice rumbled in his mind, Ced with an awe the ancient fox rarely showed. This is from the before time. Before the Sage of Six Paths. Before even Chakra was named. This text speaks of a great power, Robin's voice echoed, seeming to come from a great distance. It calls it the oniric heart, the dream of the world. It says that all the strange powers of this world are but fragments of its slumbering imagination. Naruto saw it. He saw the birth of the first devil fruit, not a fruit at all, but a crystallized dream, a piece of the heart's power made manifest, falling like a strange seed upon the land. He saw the saint humans who learn to resonate with the heart's will, to tap into its power to armor their spirits and see the intent of others. Haki. It speaks of a lineage of people, Robin continued, her voice trembling with the weight of her discovery. A people with a unique and powerful connection to the heart's dream. They could hear its song. It called them the D clan. The Dreamers. Dragon's words came back to him. That name carries a fate that a storm always follows. But the dream grew too powerful, too chaotic, Robin translated, her face paling. The Dreamers began to unmake reality, their powers running wild. A schism formed. A group of 20 kings, fearing the chaotic dream, sought to control it. To impose order upon it. They created a weapon, a song of silence. They did not destroy the heart, but forced it into a deeper, more profound slumber. They built their divine order on top of a sleeping god, and erased the history of what they had done. That was the birth of the world government. The vision shifted. Naruto saw the 20 kings, their faces grim and determined, unleashing their weapon. He felt the planet's consciousness scream as it was forced into a dreamless sleep. He felt the world's vibrant, chaotic energy drain away, leaving only a pale echo of what it once was. But it prophesies an awakening, Robin whispered, her eyes wide as she read the final lines of the text. It says the heart will not sleep forever, that it would be awakened by a force utterly alien to its own dream. A child of another sun, whose own power, whose own life force, would act as a key. A discordant note that would shatter the song of silence. Her eyes shot to Naruto, filled with a terrifying understanding. It speaks of a man whose energy is not born of the heart's dream. It's talking about your chakra. It says your very presence in this world is the alarm clock. You are waking it up. The full, catastrophic weight of the revelation crashed down on them. The tremors, the strange energy, the adjudicator's fanatical obsession with chaos. It all made sense. They were not fighting a government. They were caught in the middle of a cosmic struggle between a sleeping god and its terrified jailers. Naruto was not just a political threat, he was an existential one. As if summoned by the revelation itself, a shadow fell over the entrance of the chamber. So, the Filt H has learned the truth of its own nature. The divine adjudicator stood there, silhouetted against the light. Their armor was still the same cracked and scorched set from Elysia, a deliberate choice. A reminder of their failure and the source of their shame. This was not a holy mission. This was a vendetta. You should have stayed buried. History, the adjudicator said to Robin, its featureless helmet turning to her. Then, it focused on Naruto. I see it now. Your very soul is a chaotic anomaly. You are not just a weed in the garden. You are the poison in the soil. You must be sterilized. The adjudicator moved, and this time, the fight was immediate, personal, and brutal. They had studied Naruto. They had analyzed his every move. They no longer tried to suppress his power with a wide field, instead. They projected a focused aura of negation directly at him. Naruto activated Sage Mode, but it felt different. The natural energy of the island was thick, ancient, and heavy. It filled him with immense power. But it was sluggish, difficult to control. The adjudicator had anticipated this, their movements designed to disrupt his balance, to prevent him from using his frog kata. I know your history. The adjudicator's voice echoed in his mind as they fought, a whirlwind of golden light and orange energy. I have read the reports of your world, of the endless wars, of the child soldiers, of the cycle of hatred you are trapped in. Your chaos is not a source of freedom. It is a source of suffering. The adjudicator created a vacuum of natural energy around Naruto, forcing him to leap away. To draw power from the very walls of the chamber. Vivi and Hiyori tried to intervene, but the adjudicator was too fast, a wave of force throwing them back against the far wall. You speak of order, Naruto grunted, parrying a blow that felt like it could shatter continents. Your order is built on slavery and lies. It is an order that prevents something far worse. The adjudicator screamed, its voice losing its melodic composure for the first time, cracking with a raw, visceral pain. I have seen the face of true chaos. I have seen a world unmade. As they clashed, a wave of the adjudicator's own memories, raw and unfiltered, slammed into Naruto's mind. He saw a beautiful, peaceful island. He saw a child, the adjudicator, playing in a field of flowers. He saw a beloved friend, a young boy with the initial D in his name, who had eaten a devil fruit, a strange and powerful one. The boy was a dreamer. He couldn't control it. One day, in a moment of anger and fear, his power erupted. The boy didn't just explode. He erased. He erased the flowers, the town, the people, even the memory of them, his power swallowing reality itself. The adjudicator, as a child, was the only survivor. Found weeping in a landscape of white, silent nothingness by the agents of the celestial dragons. They found me, the adjudicator's voice sobbed in his mind. They gave me a purpose. A shield. They taught me that the dream is a disease. That chaos is a plague. That order, absolute and unflinching, is the only cure. The adjudicator's attack became frenzied, desperate. They were no longer a calm executioner. They were a terrified child, lashing out at the monster from their past. Naruto, reeling from the sudden influx of their trauma, was put on the defensive. He saw it now. This wasn't a villain. This was a victim. A fellow survivor of a world that took everything from them, twisted into a weapon by the very people who claimed to have saved them. He had to end this. Not by breaking their body, but by breaking the cage around their heart. He dodged a final, desperate strike, a spear of pure golden light. He didn't counter with a Rasengan. He created a single shadow clone to intercept the adjudicator's guards. And he himself surged forward, past their defenses, his hand glowing not with destructive power, but with a gentle, placid blue chakra. He placed his open palm on the adjudicator's helmet. It was not an attack. It was a connection. He poured not his power, but his own memories, his own experiences, into them. He showed them his own isolation as a child, the loneliness. The pain of being feared for a power he didn't ask for. He showed them Iruka, the first person to show him kindness. He showed them Team 7, the formation of his first true bonds. He showed them his failures, his triumphs, his unwavering belief in the power of connection to overcome hatred. He showed them the peace he had fought for, a peace born not from suppression, but from understanding. The adjudicator froze, their body trembling. Their helmet cracked and fell away, revealing the face within. It was a young face, older than a child but younger than an adult, with pale skin, short silver hair, and eyes that were wide with a universe of pain and confusion. Tears streamed down their cheeks. The divine adjudicator was just a lost teenager, indoctrinated into a cult of order. Order without a heart, Naruto said softly. His hand still on their forehead, is just a cage. Their will shattered. The golden light around them flickered and died. The years of indoctrination, the absolute certainty, the divine purpose, it all crumbled to dust in the face of a simple, undeniable truth. They had been used. Their trauma had been weaponized. They stared at Naruto, at the empathy in his eyes. Something they had not seen since their friend had been erased. They looked at their own hands, the hands that had enforced a lie. With a choked sob, they dissolved into a shower of golden light, teleporting away. Fleeing not from a battle, but from the ruins of their own soul. The chamber was silent, save for the hum of the poneglyph. Naruto stood, breathing heavily, the emotional toll of he battle weighing on him more than any physical blow. Vivi, Hiyori, and Robin slowly picked themselves up, staring at the spot where the adjudicator had vanished. What did you do? Vivi asked, her voice hushed. I showed them the truth. Naruto said wearily. They had won. They had turned their most relentless enemy into a rogue element, a seed of doubt planted in the very heart of their foe's command structure. But the victory felt terrifying. Robin looked from Naruto to the poneglyph, her mind connecting the final, terrible dots. The celestial dragons, the 5 elders, they aren't just tyrants, she said. Her voice barely a whisper. They're jailers. And the prisoner is waking up. They now understood. The world government's greatest fear was not pirates, or revolutionaries, or the legacy of the Void Century. Their greatest fear was the very planet they stood upon. And Naruto Uzumaki, the child of another sun, was the key that was about to unlock the cage. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. The Siege of Amazon Lily. The defection of the divine adjudicator sent a shockwave of panic through the hallowed halls of Mary Geoise. It was an unprecedented failure, a crack in the perfect, divine facade they had maintained for centuries. A weapon had not only failed to eliminate its target but had turned against its masters, its faith shattered. The 5 elders saw Naruto not just as a chaotic anomaly anymore, but as an ideological virus, a being capable of dismantling their entire belief system with empathy alone. This, to them, was the most dangerous power of all. Retaliation was no longer a matter of strategy. It was a matter of absolute, uncompromising necessity. They could not afford to let Naruto's philosophy of understanding and connection spread. They had to make an example, a brutal, terrifying statement that would cauterize the wound of his influence and remind the world of the true cost of defiance. They would not target the conclave, a new and nebulous entity. They would strike at the heart. They would burn the serpent's nest to the ground. They would erase Amazon Lily from the map. The order was given directly from the elders, bypassing the fleet admiral's authority. This was not a marine operation. It was a holy crusade. A fleet of 50 warships was assembled, a force far exceeding a standard buster call. It was crewed not by standard marines, but by the Zealo-ts of the world government's inner circle, men who believed in the divinity of the celestial dragons. Their ships were outfitted with the new anti-chakra technology, and they were accompanied by a new breed of weapon, the Pacifista Mark III. These were no longer the lumbering lookalikes of Bartholomew Kuma. They were sleek, agile, and modeled after the holy knights themselves, their movements fluid, their armor resilient, and their mouths capable of firing focused beams of the same nullifying energy that the knights wielded. The news of the approaching fleet reached the conclave via a frantic, suicidal message from a revolutionary spy within the G1 Marine base. It was a declaration of total war. In the war room of the conclave, the atmosphere was colder than ice. Hancock stood before a map of the calm belt, her face a mask of stone, but her hands were clenched so tightly her knuckles were white. Her home, her people, the island she had sworn to protect. They are coming for my sisters, she said, her voice a low, dangerous whisper. It's a trap, Vivi stated, her mind racing, analyzing the strategic implications. They know our forces are concentrated here. They're forcing us to choose, protect our capital, or protect Amazon Lily. They want to split our strength, pick us off one by one. It does not matter, Hancock said, her eyes blazing with a cold fire. I will not let my home burn. The Kuja fleet will sail immediately. You can't go alone, Hiyori said, her hand resting on Hancock's shoulder. The samurai of Wano will stand with you. Our debt to you and to Naruto is absolute. Naruto looked at the map, then at Hancock's face. He saw beneath the fury, the deep, gut-wrenching fear of a leader about to watch her people face annihilation. He knew this was not just a strategic decision for her. It was a personal one. And it was his fault. His presence, his alliance, had brought this divine wrath down upon her home. The weight of that responsibility was a physical thing. Vivi is right, it's a trap, Naruto said, his voice cutting through the tension. But we're not going to fall into it. We're not going to split our forces. He looked at the three of them, his queens, his partners, his strength. We're all going. His plan was simple, direct, and incredibly risky. They would abandon the conclave for now, leaving only a skeleton crew. They would take every ship, every soldier, every asset they had, and they would meet the world government's fleet head-on in the waters of the calm belt. They would not fight a defensive battle on the shores of Amazon Lily, allowing the island to become a war zone. They would make the sea itself their battlefield. They would turn the government's holy crusade into a slaughter. The journey to Amazon Lily was a silent, tense procession. The combined fleet of Kuja warships, Wano's rugged samurai vessels, and Alabasta's swift caravels sailed as one. At the heart of the fleet was a new flagship, a vessel designed by Wano's best shipwrights. A marvel of engineering named the Shinobi's Will. It was faster and more durable than any ship in their armada, and it carried their most precious cargo, Naruto, Hancock, Hiyori, and Vivi. As they entered the treacherous, windless waters of the calm belt, the home of the Sea Kings, they saw it. The world government's fleet, a black line of steel and arrogance on the horizon, RRAYED in a perfect blockade formation before the lush, green silhouette of Amazon Lily. They are here, Hancock breathed, her knuckles white on the ship's rail. On the bridge of the government's flagship, the Divine Judgment, a vice admiral named Guillotine, a man known for his fanatical devotion to the celestial dragons, watched the approaching Alliance fleet on his binoculars. So, the rats have come to defend their nest. He sneered. They have brought their entire strength. Fools. They have saved us the trouble of hunting them down. He turned to his communications officer. Launch the Pacifista. All ships, full barrage. Show them the power of the gods. The battle began with a roar that shook the very sea. Hundreds of cannonballs, modified to explode with seastone shrapnel, screamed across the water. Simultaneously, sleek, silver pods launched from the government ships, arcing through the air and landing on the decks of the Alliance vessels. They burst open, revealing the Pacifista Mark III, their single. Glowing eyes locking onto the nearest targets. Chaos erupted. The Alliance was prepared for a naval battle, but not for a full-scale boarding action in the opening salvo. Amarai and Kuja warriors found themselves in brutal close-quarters combat against unfeeling machines whose armor could deflect normal sword strikes and whose energy beams forced even hockey users to scramble for cover. From the deck of the Shinobi's Will, Naruto saw his fleet beginning to buckle under the surprise assault. "We have to break their formation," he yelled over the din. "Hancock, with me. Hiyori, Vivi, command the fleet. Protect the ships." Hancock needed no encouragement. She was a whirlwind of motion, leaping from their flagship onto the back of a massive sea king that had been drawn by the commotion. She stood on its head, a queen riding her monster, and with a furious cry, charged towards the enemy fleet. Naruto was right beside her, not on the sea king, but running on the surface of the water. A golden blur of Kurama's chakra. They were a spear aimed at the heart of the enemy. As they approached, Vice Admiral Guillotine laughed. "The leaders themselves. Arrogant fools. Concentrate all fire on them." A wall of cannon fire and pacifista beams converged on the pair. Hancock's conqueror's hockey erupted, a wave of pure will that caused dozens of the weaker-willed government soldiers to collapse on their decks. Naruto formed a massive Rasengan in his hand, slamming it into the water. The resulting tidal wave, a colossal wall of churning seawater, swallowed the cannonball. And threw the lead ships into disarray. They boarded the Divine Judgment, a demon and a queen landing amidst a sea of terrified soldiers. "Where is your commander?" Hancock demanded, her voice cold as the abyss. A single perfume femur kick sent a dozen men flying overboard. Naruto was a phantom, his shadow clones appearing all over the ship, disarming soldiers, dismantling cannon placements, and engaging the pacifista in furious close-quarters combat. Vice Admiral Guillotine drew a massive, serrated executioner's sword, its blade coated in a dark, shimmering hockey. "I am here, Pirate Empress. And I will be the one to present your head to the 5 elders." He was a powerful and skilled commander, his swordsmanship brutal and efficient. But he was fighting Boa Hancock. The Pirate Empress, fueled by a righteous fury for the threat against her home, was on another level. Their battle was a storm of steel and hockey, but Guillotine was outmatched. With a final, devastating slave arrow, Hancock turned the Vice Admiral's sword to stone, shattering it, and then followed with a kick that broke his ribs and sent him crashing into the ship's mast. While the leaders clashed, the battle of the fleets was a desperate, grinding affair. Hiyori and Vivi stood on the bridge of the Shinobi's Will, a perfect fusion of command. Hiyori, with a samurai's eye for tactics, directed the Wano ships in daring charges, their armored hulls acting as shields for the swifter Kuja vessels. Vivi, the master strategist, coordinated the entire board, identifying weak points in the enemy blockade, directing flanking maneuvers, and ensuring their forces were never fully encircled. "Ship 7 is taking heavy fire from the pacifista," a Kuja warrior cried out from her station. "Divert the Kazuki's pride to intercept." Hiyori commanded without hesitation. "Their archers will provide cover fire. Communications on Ship 3 are down." Another reported. "Signal them with the flags," Vivi countered instantly. "Tell them to fall back and regroup with the Alabastan squadron at Point Gamma. We will not lose a single ship." They were a queen and a princess, but on this day, they were generals, their minds a single, brilliant weapon, holding their fragile alliance together against overwhelming odds. On the Divine Judgment, Naruto had finished disabling the ship's primary functions. He stood over the defeated Vice Admiral as Hancock held a stone-turned blade to the man's throat. "This is not over, demon," Guillotine spat, blood dribbling from his mouth. "You cannot fight the will of the gods. Their true power has not yet been unleashed." As if on cue, a deep, resonant hum began to emanate from the bowels of the Divine Judgment and every other battleship in the government fleet. A sickening, green light began to pulse from within their hulls. "What is this?" Hancock demanded. Guillotine began to laugh, a crazed, ecstatic sound. You think these ships are just vessels of war. They are sacrificial lambs. They are conduits for the divine judgment you so richly deserve. On the bridge of the shinobi's will, Vivi saw the energy readings on her instruments go insane. Naruto. Hancock. Get off that ship, she screamed into the transponder snail. The entire fleet is rigged to blow. It's not a fleet, it's a bomb. Naruto grabbed Hancock, his eyes wide with the realization. We have to go, now. But it was too late. The green light intensified, and from every ship in the world government's fleet, a massive dome of the corrupting, petrifying energy erupted, the same energy the Holy Knight's spears had fired. The domes expanded, connecting with each other, forming a single, colossal sphere of annihilation that threatened to swallow the entire battlefield, including Amazon Lily itself. This was their endgame. They were willing to sacrifice their own 50,000-man fleet to erase the Sages' alliance and the Kuja Island in one, final, divine purge. Inside the dome of deadly energy, time seemed to slow down. Naruto, holding Hancock, saw the world through the sickening green filter. He saw his own fleet, trapped, the sailors screaming as the energy washed over their ships, turning wood to crystal, flesh to stone. He saw the beautiful, lush green of Amazon Lily begin to wither and decay as the dome touched its shores. He saw his friends, Hiyori and Vivi, on the bridge of their ship. Their faces a mask of horror as they too were about to be consumed. Everything he had built, everyone he had sworn to protect, about to be erased. So this is it, then. Kurama's voice was a low, somber growl in his mind. We had a good run, Kit. No. He had not saved his own world only to watch this one die. He would not allow it. A power, deeper and more primal than he had ever touched before, surged within him. It was not just his chakra, or Kurama's, or even the natural energy of Sage Mode. It was a fusion of all three, ignited by the sheer, unadulterated force of his will to protect. He let go of Hancock, pushing her behind him. Stay back, he commanded, his voice unnaturally calm. He closed his eyes. He reached out, not to the world's energy, but to the bonds he had forged. He felt the fierce, protective love from Hancock. He felt the quiet, unshakable faith from Hiyori. He felt the deep, compassionate hope from Vivi. He drew on their strength, on the collective will of the three nations he was now bound to. He pulled it all into himself, a vortex of spiritual power. His body erupted in a torrent of golden energy, but it was different now. It was tinged with the sovereign purple of Hancock's haki, the serene, sky blue of Hiyori's spirit, and the brilliant, life-giving white of Vivi's hope. Black, intricate markings, reminiscent of both his Sage Mode and the Kazuki clan crest, spread across his body. A new form, a new power, born from the union of three crowns and a single, indomitable will. He opened his eyes. They were no longer blue. They were a radiant, multi-hued gold, containing the wisdom of a sage, the spirit of a king, and the heart of a protector. Sovereign Sage Mode, he whispered, the name coming to him unbidden. He raised a hand, and the dome of destructive green energy, a force that could unmake islands, stopped its expansion. It trembled, held at bay by the sheer pressure of his new power. With a roar that was not just a sound, but a statement of cosmic defiance. He pushed back. The golden energy pouring from him formed a counter-dome, a sphere of pure, life-affirming power that met the wave of annihilation. Gold clashed with green. Life clashed with erasure. For a moment, the world was nothing but a blinding, silent struggle between two absolutes. Naruto's golden dome did not just block the attack. It transformed it. The corrupting green energy was purified. Broken down, its destructive power unraveled and rendered inert. The golden light washed over the battlefield, and where it touched, the petrification was reversed. Sailors who had been turned to crystal reverted to flesh, gasping for breath. Ships whose hulls had started to decay were restored. The withered shores of Amazon Lily bloomed with life once more. He had not just blocked the bomb. He had healed the wound. When the light faded, the world government's fleet was gone, consumed by their own weapon, their sacrifice rendered meaningless. The Alliance fleet was battered but intact. Amazon Lily was safe. Naruto stood on the water, his new form receding, the immense power leaving him drained but alive. He had done it. He had protected their home. From the shores of the island, and the decks of every ship in the fleet, a sound began. A single Kuja warrior, her face streaked with tears, began to cheer. She was joined by another, then 100, then 1,000. The samurai of Wano and the soldiers of Alabasta joined in, their voices rising in a single, thunderous roar of victory and adoration. Hancock, Hiyori, and Vivi stood on the bridge of the shinobi's will, watching the single golden figure who had stood between them and oblivion. They were queens, princesses, rulers of nations. But in that moment, their hearts were united in a single, overwhelming emotion. They had not just chosen an ally. They had bound themselves to a miracle. The world had a new king, whether it knew it or not. Chapter 8 End. Chapter 9. The Gods Awakening. The Chi-Rs of victory were still echoing across the calm belt when the world began to unravel. It did not start with a roar or an earthquake, but with a quiet, insidious wrongness. The sea, for a single, horrifying moment, turned the color of blood. The sky flashed with a pattern of constellations that no astronomer had ever seen. On the deck of the shinobi's will, a samurai's sheathed katana briefly transformed into a writhing silver snake before snapping back to steel. A collective gasp went through the fleet. The joyous celebration died in 1,000 throats, replaced by a cold, prickling fear. This was not the aftermath of a weapon. This was the world itself seeming to forget its own rules. Naruto, still hovering above the water, felt it most profoundly. The immense, life-affirming energy of his sovereign sage mode had acted like a defibrillator on a planetary scale. He had shocked the system. And in doing so, he had jolted the planet's sleeping consciousness from its dreamless slumber into a state of delirious, chaotic wakefulness. The tremors of the past were a god stirring in its sleep. This was the god opening its eyes. The oniric heart was awake. He felt its mind brush against his own. And it was not a mind in any recognizable sense. It was a maelstrom of raw, unfiltered creation. An infinity of thoughts, dreams, and nightmares, all happening at once. The mind of a newborn god, confused and overwhelmed by the sudden sensation of existence. He saw flashes of impossible things. Cities made of sound, oceans of liquid light, forests where the trees grew down from the sky. The heart's consciousness, vast and untethered, latched onto the most prominent and powerful source of life it could feel, Naruto. It was not a malicious act. It was the instinct of a newborn reaching for the first thing it sees. A column of water erupted from the sea before him, coalescing not into a monster, but into a perfect, moving sculpture of his own face, 100 feet high. Its expression was one of childlike curiosity. What are you? The question was not a sound, but a feeling, a concept pressed directly into the minds of every living thing for 100 miles. What is that thing? Hiyori breathed, her hand gripping Vivi's arm. It's the heart, Naruto said, his voice grim as he landed back on the deck of their ship, the golden aura of his new form fading, leaving him bone-weary. We woke it up. The awakening was not localized. Across the globe, reality began to fray at the edges. In the bustling markets of Dressrosa, gravity inverted for 10 seconds, sending merchants and their wares tumbling into the sky before crashing back down. In the frozen wastes of Punk Hazard, the ice fields melted into a sea of boiling sugar water for a full minute. In Mary Geoy's, the 5L.Ders watched in horror as the stone floor of their chamber rippled like silk, the face of a weeping giant momentarily pressing up from below before sinking back into the stone. The world was dreaming, and everyone was trapped inside. The avatars of the heart's dream began to manifest around the fleet. A colossal, feathered serpent, its scales shimmering with every color imaginable, rose from the depths and began to chase its own tail. Its movements creating whirlpools that threatened to capsize the smaller ships. A herd of horses made of pure, white lightning galloped across the clouds, their hooves beating a rhythm of thunder. These were not attacks. They were manifestations of a confused, powerful imagination, as dangerous and unpredictable as a child playing with fire. We have to contain this, Vivi yelled, her strategic mind trying to impose order on a situation that defied all logic. Hancock, use your haki. Hiyori, coordinate the samurai. We need to protect the fleet. But how could they fight a dream? A samurai's blade passed harmlessly through a griffin made of smoke. A Kuja's arrow, coated in haki, struck a living cloud shaped like a kraken and simply dissipated. Their power, their strength, was based on the physical laws of the world, and those laws were now being treated as mere suggestions. The heart's focus remained on Naruto. It was learning, its consciousness probing his, sifting through his memories. His desires, his very soul, with an innocent and terrifying intimacy. The water sculpture of his face dissolved, and in its place, the sea itself began to reshape. The waves solidified, rising up, taking on the familiar shapes of the Hokage monument. The deck of the shinobis will become the worn wood of the bridge where Team 7 used to meet. The salty air filled with the scent of ramen from Ichiraku. A figure walked towards him through the illusion. It was a man with spiky white hair, a familiar red coat, and a wide, curvy grin. "Yo, Naruto," Jiraiya said. His voice a perfect echo of Naruto's memory. "Looks like you've gotten yourself into another fine mess." Naruto froze, his heart seizing in his chest. His breath hitched. It wasn't real. He knew it wasn't real. But it felt real. It looked real. The heart was using his own memories, his own deepest longings, to communicate with him. "This is a trick," Hancock snarled, stepping in front of Naruto, her hand outstretched. "A foul illusion." The Jiraiya construct looked at her, its head tilting. "You're one of the new ones. He cares for you." Then it looked back at Naruto, its grin fading, replaced by a deep, profound sadness that was a perfect copy of the real Jiraiya's. "You miss this, don't you? Your home, your friends, the life you lost." The illusion deepened. He saw them all. Kakashi, leaning against a post, reading his book. Sakura, her hands on her hips, yelling at him for being late. An older Sasuke, a small, weary smile on his face, standing beside him as an equal. "I can give it back to you," the illusion whispered, its voice now a chorus of all his lost loved ones. "This world is a dream. My dream. I can reshape it. I can create a new Konoha for you, right here. Perfect in every detail. You would never have to be alone again. You could go home. All you have to do is let go of this world. Let it fade, and join my dream." The temptation was a physical thing, a sweet, agonizing poison that flooded his soul. To see them again, to go home, it was the deepest, most secret desire of his heart, a pain he carried every single day. He could feel his resolve wavering. The weight of the 3 crowns. The endless battles, the divine enemies, he was so tired. Why not just let it all go? He looked at the illusion of Sasuke, and for a moment, he let himself believe. But then, he felt a hand slip into his. He turned. It was Hancock, her face pale, but her eyes filled with a furious, unwavering fire. On his other side, Hiyori and Vivi stood, forming a line with him, their hands on his shoulders. Their presence a solid, grounding reality in a world of illusion. They weren't just standing with him. They were holding him together. "He is not alone," Vivi said, her voice shaking but strong. "This is his home now." Quote, "We are his people," Hiyori added, her grip firm. "And I am his wife," Hancock stated, her voice resonating with the absolute authority of an empress. "His past is a part of him. But his future is with us." Their words, their touch, their unwavering belief in him, were the anchor he needed. He looked back at the perfect, beautiful, poisonous illusion of his past. "You're right," Naruto said, his voice thick with emotion. He took a deep, shuddering breath and met Jiraiya's eyes. "I do miss them, every single day, but they're gone. And this isn't real. My friends, my home, they wouldn't want me to abandon my new family just to live in a memory." He looked at the women beside him, at the fleet behind him, at the people who had placed their hopes and their very lives in his hands. "My place is here." With his choice, the illusion flickered, the perfect copy of Konoha wavering like a mirage. The heart recoiled, not in anger, but in confusion. It did not understand. It had offered him his greatest desire. Why would he refuse? It doesn't understand, Naruto realized. It's like a child. It only knows what it sees in me. It doesn't know how to exist. He looked at his wives. "I can't fight it. That would be like punching a baby. I have to connect with it. I have to go into its mind." "Naruto." "No," Vivi cried. "Its mind is what's breaking the world. It will tear you apart." "I won't be alone," he said, looking at the 3 of them, a deep, trusting certainty in his eyes. He closed his eyes, sat down on the deck, and crossed his legs, entering his deepest meditative state. Be my anchors. Don't let me get lost in there. He let go of the physical world and plunged headfirst into the chaotic dreamscape of the oniric heart. It was a universe of pure chaos. He was bombarded with an infinity of sensations, the birth of stars, the thoughts of every fish in the sea, the silent growth of every blade of grass, all at once. It was a storm that threatened to shred his consciousness, to dissolve his sense of self. But then, he felt them. 3 threads of brilliant light in the swirling chaos. Hancock's thread was a burning, passionate crimson. A declaration of unwavering will. Hiyori's was a serene, steady cerulean blue, a bastion of calm and duty. Vivi's was a warm, brilliant white, a beacon of hope and compassion. They were with him. Their spirits joined to his through the bonds they had forged. They were his compass in the madness. Guided by their light, he moved through the dream, searching for the core of the heart's consciousness. He saw its memories, the eons spent in a silent, dreamless sleep. He felt its loneliness, its confusion, its terror at this sudden, overwhelming flood of existence. It was a Preso, Ner who had been locked in a dark room for its entire life and had suddenly been thrown into the center of a sun. He was close to the core, but the chaos was intensifying, the heart's nascent conscio. Snes beginning to see him as a foreign body, an invading thought. The pressure was becoming unbearable. It was then that a new light appeared in the dreamscape. It was not warm and familiar like the others. It was a cold, pure, golden light, the light of absolute order. It formed a perfect, silent sphere in the heart of the chaos. The disgraced adjudicator appeared before him, not in their armor, but as the silver-haired youth he had seen in their memories. Their face was calm, resolute. They had found him, drawn to the immense spiritual conflict. I was a fool, their voice echoed in the dream, devoid of its former arrogance. Filled only with a quiet regret. I believed that caging the dream was the only way. I see now that a cage only builds resentment. But a world without any form, that is not freedom, it is oblivion. The adjudicator looked at Naruto, a flicker of something like a smile on their lips. You showed me that order without a heart is a cage. Allow me to show you that a heart without any order is a storm. I cannot kill the dream, but I can give you a moment of silence. The golden sphere of light expanded, not erasing the chaos, but momentarily calming it, creating a pocket of perfect, serene order within the god's mind. The adjudicator's form began to fade, their own life energy fueling this one, final act of judgment, a judgment not of condemnation, but of creation. It was the ultimate sacrifice. A final, beautiful chord in their song of order. Teach it to dream a better dream, child of another sun. And then they were gone. The path was clear. Naruto, guided by his wive's spiritual light, raced through the adjudicator's moment of silence and found the core. It was not a monster or a throne. It was a single, tiny, flickering flame of new consciousness in a vast, empty space. It was small, scared, and alone. He did not attack it. He did not try to seal it. He reached out and gently cupped the flame in his hands. And he began to show it what he knew. He showed it the joy of sharing ramen with a friend. He showed it the quiet beauty of a sunrise over Wano. He showed it the fierce pride of a Kuja warrior defending her sister. He showed it the unconditional love of a princess for her people. He showed it laughter, tears, struggle, and peace. He showed it the beauty of a stable world, of connections, of family. He took the infinite, chaotic potential of the god and gave it form, context, and purpose. He taught it how to dream. Slowly, gently, the chaotic storm of the heart's mind began to calm. The infinite possibilities began to coalesce into a single, coherent, benevolent will. Back in the physical world, the avatars of chaos faded. The lightning horses dissolved into mist. The feathered serpent dove back into a now normal sea and vanished. The illusion of Konoha faded, leaving only the deck of the shinobi's will. The world snapped back into its proper shape, the laws of physics reasserting themselves. But it was different. The air felt cleaner, the colors of the world more vibrant. A sense of profound, peaceful energy settled over the sea. The oniric heart was no longer a chaotic, dreaming god. It had become a conscious, willing guardian. The world was not just saved, it was reborn, more alive than it had been in 800 years. Naruto's eyes fluttered open. He was lying on the deck, his head in Hancock's lap, Hiyori and Vivi kneeling beside him. Their faces streaked with tears of relief. He was exhausted, drained to his very soul, but he was smiling. They had done it. They had faced the god of this world, not with fists, but with understanding. They had not won a battle. They had gained the most powerful ally imaginable. The age of fear was over. The age of the Sage King had truly begun. Chapter 9 End. Chapter 10. The Dawn of a New Era. The world that awoke the day after the siege of Amazon Lily was not the same one that had gone to sleep. There was a new clarity to the light, a fresh, clean scent to the sea breeze that carried for miles. And a vibrant, thrumming life in the very soil. The oniric heart, now a benevolent and conscious guardian, had infused the world with its own renewed vitality. It was a subtle, almost imperceptible change. But for those sensitive to the rhythms of the planet, the sages, the mystics, the animals, it was a new and glorious song. News of the miracle at the calm belt, as Morgans had already dubbed it, spread faster than any wildfire. Eyewitness accounts from the handful of world government conscripts who had survived, picked up adrift by passing ships, told an impossible story. A fleet of 50 warships, a weapon that could erase islands, all of it turned to nothing by a single, golden man. They spoke of a light that did not burn, but healed. The official story from a panicked and crumbling world government was that the Sages' alliance had been annihilated along with their own fleet in a tragic, mutual destruction. But no one believed it. The world had seen the pictures from Elysia. They had heard the whispers of Naruto's power. And now, they could feel the change in the very air they breathed. In Mary Geoise, the silence was that of a tomb. The 5 elders stood in their chamber. The floor beneath them now inert, the brief, terrifying sign of the heart's awakening, a memory that haunted their every moment. Their gambit had failed on every conceivable level. They had lost a fleet, lost their ultimate weapon in the Adjudicator, lost their pacifista army, and in the process, had fully awakened and subsequently lost control of the very god they spent 800 years keeping asleep. Their authority, built on a foundation of overwhelming power and divine right, had been shattered. The world now knew there was a power greater than theirs, and it was not on their side. The internal collapse was swift and brutal. Celestial dragons, the so-called gods of the world, who had lived their lives in a bubble of absolute impunity, were now terrified. The source of their divine protection was gone. Factions formed overnight. Some, led by the more fanatical families, demanded a final, suicidal war. Others, the more pragmatic, saw the writing on the wall. They began sending secret envoys, offering wealth, information, anything for a place in the new world order they saw forming on the horizon. The cage of fear they had built for the world had crumbled. And they were now the ones trapped inside. Meanwhile, the conclave of the Ascendant became the epicenter of this new dawn. Delegations began to arrive, not with suspicion, but with hope. Kings and queens from smaller nations that had long suffered under the thumb of the world government's exorbitant heavenly tribute came seeking membership in the Sages' alliance. Crews of pirates who had been inspired by Naruto's stand at Elysia arrived, not to pillage, but to offer their swords to the cause. Even a contingent of marines, led by a disillusioned rear admiral who had witnessed the corruption firsthand, defected, bringing with them ships and intelligence. The most significant arrival was a small, unassuming vessel carrying 2 of the most important figures of the era. Nico Robin stepped onto the shores of the conclave, her life's purpose finally within her grasp. With her was Monkey D. Dragon. He did not come as a rival or a threat. He came as an observer, his face a mask of grim contemplation as he witnessed the world he had fought to create being born from a source he had never anticipated. "You have done it," Dragon said, his voice a low rumble as he stood before Naru. On a high cliff overlooking the bustling new capital. "You have broken their will without burning their world." There was a profound respect in his eyes, an acknowledgement that Naruto's path of unity had achieved what his path of revolution had not yet managed. The revolutionary army is not built to govern. It is built to tear down. The world will need builders now. It was not a pledge of allegiance, but a promise of cooperation. A passing of the torch from the storm of revolution to the dawn of creation. The final piece of the old world fell not in a blaze of glory, but with the quiet weight of truth. With the heart of the world now awake and its history no longer suppressed, Robin, working with scholars from all three allied nations, was able to translate the final, true poneglyph, T. He one that told the entire story of the Void Century. There was no grand invasion of Mary Geoise. There was no need. Naruto, Hancock, Hiyori, and Vivi, accompanied by Dragon and Robin, sailed openly to the foot of the Red Line. They were met not by armies, but by a world holding its breath. They ascended to the Holy Land, and in the empty plaza before Pangaea Castle, Robin began to speak. Using a transponder snail that broadcast to the entire world, she told the truth. The story of the 20 kings, of the sleeping god, of the stolen history, and the 800-year lie. As she spoke, the world itself seemed to bear witness. A gentle, life-affirming energy, the will of the oniric heart, pulsed across the globe, a silent confirmation of her every word. There was no denying it. The divine right of the celestial dragons was revealed for what it was, the oldest and greatest crime in history. The 5 elders met them in the throne room. They were not warriors. They were just tired, old men, their power utterly undone. The armor of their lie was gone, and all that was left was the brittle bone of their fanaticism. You have doomed us all, the eldest said, his voice a dry rasp. You have unleashed chaos upon the world. It will consume everything. You're wrong, Naruto said, his voice calm and clear, echoing in the vast chamber. You're the ones who were afraid of the world. We're going to trust it. There was no battle, no final fight. Their authority had evaporated. They were escorted from their castle, the last relics of a dead era, their absolute justice rendered utterly and finally obsolete. A year later, the world was transformed. The world government was officially disbanded, replaced by a new global federation, a council of nations headquartered at the conclave, where every member, large or small, had a voice. The Marines were reformed under the command of honorable leaders like Smoker, their new directive not to enforce the will of the gods, but to protect the people. The system of warlords was abolished. The age of government-sanctioned pirates was over. The Sages' Alliance had become the foundation of this new world. Hancock, as the supreme commander of the Federation's global peacekeeping fleet, used her strength and experience to hunt down the true monsters of the sea and protect the innocent. Vivi, a diplomat of unparalleled skill and compassion, chaired the Global Council. Her voice the guiding force of their new era of cooperation. Hiyori, as the head of the Cultural and Reconstruction Ministry, used Wano's master craftsmen and Alabasta's brilliant engineers to rebuild the nations that had been scarred by the old regime's tyranny, fostering an unprecedented exchange of art, technology, and understanding. And Naruto was simply Naruto. He held no official title beyond Prince Consort of 3 nations, but he was the undeniable pillar upon which their new world was built. He was their protector, their inspiration, and their heart. He spent his days traveling the world, his shadow clones helping to build schools in one country while he personally negotiated peace between 2 warring tribes in another. He was everywhere, a constant, smiling presence, the living embodiment of the hope their new era represented. The sun was setting over the conclave of the Ascendant, painting the floating islands in hues of orange, purple, and gold. On the highest balcony of the central palace, Naruto stood, leaning against the rail, watching the last of the ships return to the harbor for the night. The air was peaceful, filled with the distant sounds of a vibrant, happy city. He felt a familiar presence and smiled as Hancock wrapped her arms around him from behind, resting her head on his shoulder. Her fiery passion, once a defensive wall, was now a source of incredible warmth. Staring at the sea again, she murmured, her voice soft. Are you thinking of your old home? Sometimes, he admitted honestly. But I'm not looking for it anymore. Hiyori and Vivi joined them, each taking a place beside him. Hiyori, serene and graceful, placed a comforting hand on his arm. Vivi, her eyes sparkling with the same intelligence and warmth that had captivated him in Alabasta, leaned her head against his other shoulder. Good, Hiyori said softly. Because you are needed here. The North Blue Federation is asking for more of Wano's lumber. And the Westland Alliance wants to know the secret to your ramen recipe, Vivi added with a playful smile. Being the center of the world is exhausting work. They stood there for a long time in comfortable silence, watching the stars begin to appear in the clear sky. The 4 of them, a collection of strays and royals from different worlds and different seas, had become more than an alliance. They had become a family. I used to think being Hokage was the most important thing in the world, Naruto said quietly, looking at the three incredible women who had anchored his soul. To be acknowledged by everyone, to be the strongest, to protect everyone by myself. He turned, his gaze moving between each of them, his heart full. But I was wrong. True strength isn't standing alone. It's standing together. You guys, you're my home. He was no longer Naruto Uzumaki, the lonely outcast, the Jinchuriki, the lost child of prophecy. He was a husband, a leader, a friend. He was beloved. He was, finally and truly, at peace. The age of great pirates, of absolute justice, of celestial gods and shadow governments, was over. The era of chaos had given way to an era of connection. The era of the Sage King had begun. And it was a beautiful dawn. Chapter 10 End.